Season 3, Episode 1, Mr. Ruggerio's Neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be... Oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm just going through a stutter step!
You were warned, Pete. The money goes up to Slipmaker.
Oh no! Welcome back to The Sopranos, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I wasn't out for too long. The episode opens up the same way the last two seasons have opened up, with Tony miserably walking down the driveway to pick up the morning paper. The top headline reveals that competition is beginning to heat up in the mob over garbage contracts, which bumps Tony out, since that means more eyes are going to be focused on the Mafia. Speaking of eyes focused on the Mafia, we're taken to an FBI meeting, where Agents Skip, Harris, and several others discuss the fact that they haven't been able to find anything incriminating on Tony for years, and how pussy was likely turned into fish food by the guys. They mention the possibility of Livia testifying against Tony for the airline tickets, and they later ask for a sneak and peek warrant to place wiretaps in Tony's basement, which the judge reluctantly allows. A couple of agents sneak on Tony's house super duper extra discreetly, this discreetness being put on full display as Tony spots them in 3 seconds. The agents continue discussing when and how they're gonna place the wiretaps, and the next day, a handful of agents spy on the Soprano family to make sure that everyone is left. Right after we're treated to the greatest clip in television history.
I'm a fool to do your dirty work. Go, yeah.
We're also treated to this fantastic scene of the Sopranos going about their day-to-day routines as the FBI agents spy on each one of them, with, and I'm not kidding you, a mashup of the Peter Gunn theme and the song Every Breath You Take by the Police playing in the background. I guess they couldn't decide which song to play in the background, but strangely enough, the mashup actually works pretty well. The music stops for a moment so we can listen to Paulie justify not touching the tip of his shoelaces because they have germs on them, which, yeah, I'll kill people and get their blood and guts all over me, but dirty shoelaces? Gross. Silvio tells Paulie to suck his dick as the FBI wiretapping stuff continues, with the agents carefully cutting off the house's security system and unlocking the doors as Agent Harris looks at his watch all Breaking Bad-like. We cut back to Tony and the crew as they feast on this lunch fit for a king, with Patsy talking about the fact that it would have been his twin brother's birthday today, who was whacked by Tony last season for spreading rumors about Tony killing Livia. Tony acts like he didn't have him killed and attempts to sympathize with Patsy as Chris goes, "Wow, that's pretty fucked up that your brother died." You know, the dead one. Tony attempts to shift the conversation off Patsy's dead brother as Patsy attempts to shift it back onto him. And while Patsy says that he misses him so much, Tony's like, "Hey, who gives a fuck? It's your birthday!" Hooray! The FBI guys creepily stare at Adriana's ass as she and Carm play tennis. And another one watches AJ smoke it up with some skater guys as another one figures out the perfect spot to place a wiretap so that the AC doesn't muffle up the noise. We're taken to Meadows' college dorm room, and her completely unbearable roommate starts dancing as an FBI lady listens in on their conversation. Meadows' roommate, named Caitlin, talks about getting blackout drunk every moment every day, hashtag that drunk life, as the Polish maid, Liliana, teaches English to her husband during lunch as, and you're not gonna believe this, an FBI agent spies on the convo. They speak a bunch of Polish as the FBI guys rewatch the tape recording taken of Tony's basement, where Agent Harris notices Tony's water heater is leaking like crazy, mentioning that it could explode at any point, and they locate a lamp as the perfect place to hide the wiretap. They create a 1-to-1 replica of the lamp with a wiretap hidden inside, and we transition to the next day as we watch Tony pick up his daily paper for the 19th time this episode, where the FBI agents wait until everyone's left the premises to start wiretapping this bitch. Back at the Bing, Gigi informs Tony that Patsy has also been participating in hashtag that drunk life lately due to the death of Philly, and that he's been saying things about how he knows the truth about how his brother died, whatever that means. And Tony and the crew speculate on why Patsy's acting this way and what they should do. Paulie says that they've always got the option to whack Patsy as Agent Harris informs the other agents that it's go time, as another agent nearly jizzes his britches looking at Adriana. Yeah, that doesn't look suspicious at all. The FBI guys spying on the Sopranos household notice that Liliana is in the house screaming her head off as Carm, Adriana, Tony, and Furio all leave back to the house at the same time, creating this intense situation as all of the agents try to leave the scene as quick as possible. And the mashup in the background draws to an end as Agent Harris frustratedly throws his hat on the seat and drives away. It turns out that Agent Harris's suspicions were correct, as the water heater in the basement went kablooey and caused a massive flood. Tony and Carm attempt to clean things up and call over their plumber, Mr. Ruggerio, to help with the mess. Hey! The FBI guys reorganize to try and figure out another time to plant the wiretap in the house, and the next morning, they send over some guys to the Cusimano's household to spy on the Sopranos in their backyard, where Tony talks with Gigi about the garbage routes. Before the FBI guys say fuck it, let's go, they find Patsy stumbling into Tony's backyard with a gun in his hand, and the FBI guys band together in case Patsy pulls a fast one. However, while Patsy contemplates murder, he ultimately changes his mind and does the next best thing. going wee-wee in Tony's swimming pool.
I don't understand this at all.
Later, Agent Harris informs Chief Frank of the water heater incident. And while Frank says that they've had Tony's phone bugged for years and that he barely says a peep about anything, Harris says that they're still gonna go through with the plan. As the FBI guys enter the house and place the fake lamp, however, Liliana gets frustrated with her husband for sucking at English and leaves to her car, and one of the agents runs over to Liliana to distract her before she leaves. That one FBI guy goes awooga boyoyoyoing as he spies on Adriana, and two other agents realize that the intended location of the wiretap has been moved to a place where the AC is noisier, and they make an executive decision to just move it to the less noisy spot and hope nobody notices. Meanwhile, Meadow brings Hunter over to her room, where Caitlin is sitting in bed all mopey, realizing that drinking cocktails at 11:30 in the morning is actually a bad idea. She talks about how she's been staying off alcohol for the past week as the FBI lady listens in, and we cut to Tony walking into the pork store as Patsy does money shit over at the table. Tony asks Patsy what his problem is, like Tony killed his brother or something. And when Patsy claims that he doesn't have a problem with anybody and that he likes working here, Tony subtly intimidates him, essentially telling Patsy, "Hey, I'm the one who's helping you make all this money, so get over your dumb dead brother and stop making a racket," and demands Patsy to say out loud that he's over it, which Patsy reluctantly does as Tony leaves the room. The FBI guys finally manage to place the fucking wiretap as they leave the house, or as they codenamed it, the sausage factory, and the rest of the agents high-five each other and stop spying on the rest of the Sopranos. The agents test out the wiretap the next day, listening in on Tony's conversation. And while they think it could be something incriminating, it just turns out to be Tony talking with Liliana's husband about fixing the water heater. The agents continue listening in through the wiretap as Carm and Tony have a typical conversation about food and family and whatnot as the show zooms in on the fake lamp planted by the FBI, and the show fades to black, ending the episode. If this episode felt like it was going all over the place, that's because it 100% was. One thing that's always stuck out to me about this episode is just how many fade outs there are. I guess that has to do with the fact that this particular episode does a lot of skipping through the timeline in order to keep up with the FBI's operations, and they wanted to make it obvious to the audience that, hey, it's a different day this time. But every time I see one, it just makes me think, oh, commercial break time. I know this is kind of a dumb nitpick, but The Sopranos editing almost never uses transition edits like these, instead simply cutting from one scene to another. So this episode containing so many fade outs sticks out like a sore thumb to me. Side note, this is not the first time or the last time I'll be griping over the show's strange editing choices. Getting into the actual meat of the episode though, I actually didn't think it was too bad. I've seen a lot of people write this off as a filler episode, and to be honest, I can't really argue with that sentiment. There's not a whole lot in terms of plot progression, and we probably could have gotten to the FBI guys planning the wiretap halfway through the episode, but I don't really think that's what this episode is going for. It's the first episode of the season, and they're trying to reintroduce us to each of the characters to ease our way back into the Sopranos universe and see what's changed and what hasn't. While other season openers in the show have certainly done this much better, I'd only really have a problem with it if it wasn't entertaining, but luckily for me, it most certainly was. I thought the FBI were very fun to watch, and witnessing them deal with flaws in their plan and trying to improv their way out made for some equally funny and intense moments. This episode did a great job reintroducing us to each of the main characters in the show, and I love the conflict with Patsy and Tony, especially the scene where Tony somehow doesn't spot Patsy aiming a fucking gun in this house and then pissing into his pool 10 seconds later. The episode never feels like it's dragging in any area or putting too much time on a single character, though that probably would have been a very difficult task to accomplish given just how many old and new characters the episode needed to cover. Overall, I'm giving this episode a low 8 here. Nothing too crazy, but a solid season opener nonetheless. Season 3, Episode 2.
Proshai, Livushka.
The episode opens up on two sanitation workers having a peaceful night in their... A newspaper clipping reveals that this explosion was the result of a firebomb planted due to conflicts in Tony's sanitation company. And we pan over to Tony lying unconscious on the ground, with pools of blood splattered around his body. Carm comes home and realizes that Tony made an oopsie and rushes over, asking what happened. And the show rewinds us all the way back to how Tony got to this point. And no, what you're seeing here is not my editing. This is ripped directly from the show. I feel so seen watching this. The show ends the rewind with Tony walking in on Meadow literally rewinding a movie, Public Enemy, which she says she's watching with a friend for class. Tony asks which friend she's brought over, and the friend, Noah Tannenbaum, walks through the basement door, who starts happily talking with Tony about film as Tony's "oh my god, it's a black person" alarm starts blaring in his head. Instead of going, "Hey, it was great for you two to meet, alright Noah, let's leave," Meadow instead decides to run upstairs and leave Noah and Tony with each other to have what can only be described as just the most pleasant of chit-chats. Noah's chipper attitude quickly dampens as Tony starts asking for his background and giving Noah some racially charged comments that would make low-tier God blush. Tony tells Noah not to make any moves on Meadow as Noah says fuck you to Tony. And Meadow comes back down to leave as Noah quickly leaves before her. Tony tries to quell his livid attitude by getting some gabagool out of the fridge. And when he opens the pantry to find something else to wash it down with, we're given one of the greatest bits of comedy The Sopranos has to offer. We cut back to after Carm found Tony lying dead on the floor, with Tony wrapping a towel on his arm to quell the bleeding as he complains about the fact that Noah and Meadow might get together. And Carm tells Tony not to instigate things or else Meadow will want to date Noah even more out of spite. The scene that comes after this one may just be one of the most infamous in Sopranos history. Tony goes over to Olivia's house to demand she not talk to the police and state the airline tickets weren't stolen if on the witness stand, and finds out from Svetlana that she never filled out any of the baby books Carmela gave to her 20 years ago. He says that he wished he never started talking with her again and tells Olivia, fuck it, do whatever you want before leaving. Now you might be thinking, hey, what's so infamous about this? It's just a normal looking Sopranos scene. Oh my goodness! Alright, so there's a lot that I have to explain about this scene and why Olivia looks the way she does in this scene. Remember what I said at the beginning of the season 2 video about how Olivia was originally going to be killed by Tony in the season 1 finale? Well, during the time that the show was being created, Nancy Marchand, the actress who played Livia, was struggling with lung cancer and nearing the end of a long acting career, and according to David Chase, she requested that he keep her working and keep Livia as a major character in the story, a request that David Chase would accommodate, likely due to just how great Nancy Marchand's performance as Livia Soprano was.
Everybody always told me there was no one like my mother. But when all of my relatives started watching the show, they said, my God, that's Aunt Norma, that's your mother. I said, no shit. It was like she was channeling her. It was like, oh, and she just had it.
The initial storyline of season 3 was that Livia was going to testify against Tony in court and claim that the airline tickets were in fact stolen, which would have undoubtedly made for some fantastic television. Tragically, however, Nancy Marchand ended up passing away on June 18th, 2000, just one day before her 72nd birthday. While I absolutely hate the character of Olivia, my dislike of her is all thanks to the absolutely terrific performance put on by Nancy Marchand. Her character casts such a large shadow over this series as Tony progresses as a character through each episode. Rest in peace, Nancy Marchand. Due to Nancy Marchand's death, the writers now had to rework the plotlines of season 3 to write Livia out of the show. And David Chase, the writer of this episode, decided to do this by writing in a scene of Tony meeting with Livia to tell her not to talk with the police and testify that the tickets weren't stolen. But that's the problem. How do you do a scene with Livia when the actress for Livia is no longer with us? Well, this is the alternative that the showrunners decided to go with. They fucking CGI'd her. Now granted, this was made in the early 2000s, so the CGI was never exactly going to be on par with today's movies and TV shows. But even still, the end result is so butchered and sloppily pasted together that it borders on disrespectful. There were points where the CGI looks passable, and then other times where it looks so uncanny and off-putting. The way they had Livia added into the scene was by having a body double stand in, and then during post-production, Nancy Marchand's head was placed over. They recreated several shots of Livia in the show in order for the face and hair to line up more, as well as reused voice lines she uttered in the show.
Oh, me? What did I do? Whoa, what did I do? I don't like that kind of talk. Now just stop it, it upsets me.
While I'm sure the showrunners had good intentions, watching this scene over 20 years later, it aged about as well as spoiled milk. The problem with reusing scenes from previous episodes is that there were moments where the lighting interface just straight up does not match the lighting of the actual scene. And reusing voice lines where the delivery varies in terms of tone, emotion, and volume makes the scene really confusing to follow. This scene apparently set the budget back over $250,000 and was only worked on by 4 people over the span of 2 weeks, and my main question here is this. Why the fuck could this not have been a phone call? Look, I understand that this was the last scene between Tony and Livia, so having them meet together one final time makes sense. But you're telling me that Tony couldn't have just called Livia one of those telephone booths so that he wouldn't be listened into by the cops? Svetlana's taking care of her, just have him call Svetlana and then have her give the phone to Livia. It would have been a lot simpler, a lot cheaper, and frankly, a lot less egregious than what we got here. It's such a baffling decision that's caused me to revisit the scene so many times. There are times where CGI has worked in the show's favor, and this is not one of those moments. Anyways, after the CGI scene, Tony goes home to watch Public Enemy, the same movie Meadow and Noah were watching. And Meadow confronts Tony, asking if he said anything to Noah. And Tony makes another totally polite comment regarding Noah's ethnicity as Carm calls Meadow upstairs. Tony goes in the backyard to readjust his sprinkler, and when he comes back in, Carm, Meadow, and AJ are all waiting for him, as Carmela delivers some shocking news to Tony.
Oh, your mother died. You're kidding. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Tony sits down in his chair with sweat on his forehead, and Carm and Tony later drive over to the house, where an ambulance carries Livia's body to the hospital. Svetlana tells the two that Livia died due to a stroke, and apologizes to Tony and Carm for Livia not being able to fill out the baby books, which Tony mentioned she hadn't written into in 20 years, which causes Carm to be like, yeah, figures. Zero IQ AJ has trouble figuring out the meanings of a poem written by Robert Frost for school, and Meadow tells him that the poem represents the author's eventual death, and not Christmas like AJ initially thinks. As Meadow leaves the house with her friends, something really weird happens. While AJ does his homework, he hears a loud creaking sound coming from outside his room, and when he looks out to investigate, he calls out for a certain person.
Grandma?
This moment might be a reference to a scene in the final episode of Season 1, when AJ talked with Livia after overhearing her yelling in the backyard when she managed to escape the nursing home. In the poem AJ was reading, titled Stop by the Woods on a Snowing Evening, the last few lines of the poem that AJ reads out loud go like this. The woods are lovely, dark and deep.
But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep.
And miles to go before I sleep. In my opinion, I believe that this scene represents the ongoing effects that Livia's words on AJ will have on him for the rest of the series onwards. While Livia is physically dead, the effect that she has on the Sopranos family is everlasting. And with AJ in particular, the ideas that she planted in his head begin to sprout more and more as the show progresses, which, in a way, have miles to go before they sleep. I believe that AJ calling out to his grandma is the series' way of showing us how Livia will impact the family for years to come, and how it'll always feel like she's there, even when we know that Livia's gone. Tony talks with Barbara about Livia's death, and Svetlana has a drink with Tony and Carm, uttering the name of this episode while honoring Livia.
Proshai, Livushka.
Which means what?
Goodbye, little Livia.
Paulie, Silvio, and Chris give Tony their condolences at his house, and Carm's parents come over as well as Tony finds out some news about his sister and responds peacefully.
I want the fuck! Goddamn fucking bitch!
Tony angrily calls Janice, who tells Tony that she's not coming to the funeral since she doesn't want to get in trouble for the whole Richie incident. And while Janice continues trying to make excuses not to go, Tony calls her bluff on all of them and says he'll pay for her to come down. Tony has trouble sleeping that night and eases his worries by watching Public Enemy again. And the FBI guys discuss Livia's death as Tony casually munches out of a big-ass box of honeycomb. A bunch of other Mafia guys arrive at the house to give their condolences, including this little fucker named Ralph Cifaretto, who we are going to be getting very familiar with this season. Tony brings Albert and Ralphie to talk as Janice arrives going wham 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 poor Livia as if she wasn't just saying she didn't want to go. Tony tells Albert and Ralphie to quit fucking around with the sanitation trucks, saying that their conflict is constantly getting them in the news. And while Ralphie acts all sarcastic and claims that his crew is next in line for the contract, Tony tells them to fix the issue and knock it off with the fires. Tony, Barbara, and Janice meet with the funeral guys to arrange the plans for Livia. And while Tony says that Livia didn't want a funeral or wake of any kind, Janice has a fake meltdown over this thought and insists that Livia should have one. And while Tony argues with Janice, Barbara becomes convinced that she should have a funeral, which Tony reluctantly obliges. Tony talks with Melfi about his conflicting thoughts about Livia's death, going from saying that he's happy and relieved that she's dead and calling her a cunt to instinctually defending her for the things that Livia did to him when Melfi brings it up. Melfi essentially says, dude, she was an asshole, you can hate her. And Tony ends the conversation by going, well, she's dead. It's revealed in the next scene that Ray Curto, a capo in the Soprano crime family, is cooperating with the FBI and says that he'll be wearing a wire to Livia's wake. Janice searches around the basement for money that Livia supposedly hid, a callback to that one crazy-ass scene from Do Not Resuscitate, and gets jump-scared by Tony, who comes downstairs to talk. Tony talks about Melfi saying that not all women are cut out to be mothers, as Janice speculates that she, Tony, and Barbara were the reason she was so miserable, mentioning that she barely saved any artwork or other memorabilia that her kids collected, with Janice in particular having nothing saved. Tony sympathizes with Janice as we cut to Livia's wake, where Jackie Jr. and Rosalie give their condolences, as Silvio complains to his wife, Gabriella, who I accidentally called Adriana's mother in the Season 2 video, oops, that he has to miss the Jets' first home game for this. Fun fact, Gabriella is played by Maureen Van Zant, who's actually married to Silvio, Steve Van Zant, in real life. Isn't that sweet? Speaking of sweet, Christopher pre-games the funeral by ripping a bong with Adriana and Furio, as Tony notices a bouquet of flowers sent over by the FBI, which just seems kind of insensitive on their part. Like, the guy's mom died, sure he's killed people, but like, give him a second to breathe. Tony notices Ralphie fucking with Carm as Junior and Bobby walk into the funeral, where Junior is especially heartbroken over Livia's loss. And Tony meets with this assemblyman guy, as well as the Reverend, who mentions the conversation they had back in Season 2 about them becoming the new old folks. Junior attempts to make amends with Carmelo before before talking with Tony in private, recommending that Tony promote Ralphie to captain due to his earnings being very high ever since Richie disappeared. To which Tony mentions that Richie also tried to have him killed last season, asking why Junior keeps doing this shit to him as he tells Junior to just stay at home and walks away. Ralphie heeds Tony's word for there not to be any fires, opting to instead have his guys attack the man directly with baseball bats. Tony watches Public Enemy once again that night, and the next day, everyone attends Livia's burial, where Meadow is still pissed at Tony for the whole Uncle Ben incident. After the burial, Janice talks with Svetlana about the house, and mentions a record collection that Livia had that Janice wants, which Svetlana says Livia gave to her, acting as one last spiritual middle finger from Livia to Janice from the afterlife. Janice says, haha, good one, now give them to me, fuckface. But Svetlana says, nuh-uh. We get a flashback of Livia leaking the story to Artie that Tony caused the fire at Artie's restaurant, and we cut back to present day Artie, who's still pissed over this. Tony laments that Meadow's innocence is gone, as Meadow still looks pissed at Tony. And the other Mafia guys tell jokes with each other before shutting all of that down the moment Tony walks by. The service at Tony's house continues on as Furio talks with Paulie about the show Survivor and how, whoa, what the fuck? I've seen people speculate that Pussy acts as a sort of ghost that's haunting Tony's house, which, while it does line up with a lot of the other supernatural shit that occurs in this show, personally, I don't think this has to do with anything ghost-related. I personally believe that this is the series' way of showing us how Pussy still passes by in Tony's conscious every once in a while, as he shows up for a brief moment and isn't acknowledged by anyone as Tony seems surprised while Paulie and Furio talk. Before Tony can think about it further, Janice clinks her glass and tells everyone to meet in the living room so they can talk about Livia, which pisses off Tony as he asks Janice what the fuck she's doing before reluctantly joining the gathering. Janice plays a song that Livia really liked as everyone awkwardly stands around and doesn't say anything, with one guy coming down the stairs and then quickly going back up because Livia sucks. Janice quickly turns off the song as quite literally nobody has anything nice or memorable to say about her. No matter how many times Janice tries to get the ball rolling, nobody says anything, and this frustration leads to Janice mentioning how Livia saved Tony and Barbara's memorabilia but none of hers, which prompts Tony to tell her to wrap it up. Tony leaves the scene as Christopher starts going on this weird drug-fueled diatribe about how there could be another Livia out there. And Tony stands around by the pool as Artie angrily takes the garbage out. Tony asks what Artie's problem is, and Artie says that their little secret died with Livia. And he kicks around the garbage before threatening to reveal Tony's secret to the family. And Tony rushes back inside with Artie as Chris keeps saying weird shit. Everyone continues sitting around in awkward silence as Carmela begins this fantastic monologue about how terrible Livia was, causing Carm's father to rant for a moment about how Livia estranged Carmela from her own parents. Carmela continues with her speech, saying that Livia specifically didn't want a funeral because she didn't believe that anyone loved her enough to come, and blames her children for setting up the funeral against her wishes, with Janice glancing over at Tony as if he was the one who was crying and shitting his pants over Livia not wanting one.
She wouldn't write down her memories for her grandchildren because she figured nobody loved her enough to read them. She knew there was a problem.
Artie offers his desserts to the attendees as everyone continues sitting around in silence, and later that night, Tony continues watching Public Enemy, as he watches a scene where the main character recovers from an injury and is set to return home, where the mother is ecstatic for his arrival as she begins gleefully cleaning around the house, which causes Tony to get emotional. I don't believe that Tony's crying for Livia in this moment, but rather because he wished his mother was less of a miserable sack of shit like she was in his life. As he watches the mother in the movie gladly clean the house for her son, something that Livia never would have done in a zillion years. Tony continues getting emotional over the movie as the episode draws to a close. This was a great episode, much better than I remember it being. The episode kicks off with a cavalcade of memorable Sopranos moments, like the Uncle Ben scene and CGI Livia, and it continues on by showing us the fallout of Livia's death and the impact Livia left on the family. The ending scene with Janice gathering everyone around to fondly celebrate Livia's life with nothing but complete silence apart from Chris's weed-induced ramblings was amazing. And Carmela's monologue near the end was extremely cathartic, as well as served as a great character moment for Carmen and her parents. The episode did an amazing job showing us how the death of Livia affected all the characters in the show, ranging from, wow, she was a piece of shit, to, wow, I gotta miss the game for this, to, oh my god, is Livia a ghost? This is one of those episodes that I enjoyed a lot more on rewatch. It sets up a ton of conflict in the future, as well as introduces us to some new characters, particularly Ralph Cifaretto, who we'll be seeing a lot more of shortly. I forgot that this was the episode he was introduced in. He just kind of shows up, no big intro or anything. Damn, I wasn't expecting this, but I'm honestly feeling a light S tier for this episode. Season 3, Episode 3, Fortunate Son. Some folks are born made to wear the flag. Alright, enough singing. The episode opens up with Chris rolling up a joint with Adriana when his pager starts beeping off, which, for those of you who might be too young to know, is something that old people used to use. He calls Paulie, who tells Chris to dress nice and meet him in half an hour. And while Adriana's upset that Chris is flaking out again on a nice day with her, Chris tells Adriana that this could be the day he finally becomes a made guy, which makes Adriana excited. She tells Chris that she loves him before he heads off, and he meets Paulie in the parking lot, who brushes Chris off before taking him in his car. They take Chris down to a dank-looking basement, where Chris realizes that this really is the moment. And Silvio makes fun of him for being a nervous Nelly before Tony takes him and this guy, Eugene Pontecorvo, to a table, where Tony begins the initiation. He tells the two the importance of becoming made, saying that the family comes before anything else and that once you're in, you're in. As Tony pokes Chris's finger with a needle, Chris notices a disheveled raven staring at him through the window, which unnerves Chris as the ritual commences. The raven disappears as soon as the ritual ends, and everyone celebrates as we cut to the after party, where the guys watch some boobies go boing boing as Paulie gives Chris his sportsbook operation, at the cost of some fees Chris needs to kick up to Paulie. Carmine talks to Tony about his panic attacks and the fact that he sees a shrink, and while Tony's like, how the fuck do you know that? Carmine tells Tony that everyone knows and that there shouldn't be a stigma with Tony and his problems, saying that he should focus on himself more in order to keep things stable with the mob. Janice watches some porn with Tony as Tony tells Janice that Svetlana's moving out of Olivia's place and that Janice can live there if she wants. And Janice has a change of heart and humbly declines this offer. Haha, just kidding, she starts packing. Chris heads over to a pizza parlor where Jackie Jr. happens to be hanging out with his friend Dino. And he shit talks Chris behind his back before he and Dino get up to talk with Chris. Dino tries to convince Chris to join a coffee house operation of theirs, and Jackie gets pissed at him for this and takes his anger out on this random guy getting pizza.
Watch where the fuck you going. Kiss my ass. Hey! Take that shit outside. Don't disrespect the pizza parlor.
Don't disrespect the pizza parlor. Chris immediately disrespects the pizza parlor by saying he can't be seen there anymore. And we cut to another Melfi meeting with Tony, where Tony says that he wants to start seeing more change now as they talk about the conversation Tony had with Carmine along with his latest panic attack. Melfi makes a really interesting connection between this panic attack and the one in the very first episode, noting that, in both situations, he was preparing meat of some kind, with him cooking sausages in the first episode and taking gabagool out of the fridge in the previous episode.
Let's get back to that gabagool.
Gabagoo! Chris is having some troubles with a sportsbook operation as he makes some bad decisions that cost him big, as Tony cooks some more meat on the grill that night as Chris says that he screwed up. Tony tells Chris to step it up and keep an eye out on Jackie and make sure he doesn't get into any funny business. As Rosalie and Ralphie wonder where the fuck Jackie is and speculating that he's getting into funny business. Jackie later calls the Sopranos household, telling Rosalie that he's not coming to the family dinner, which makes Rosalie upset as Carm comforts her. Later, Chris gives Paulie his cut of the sportsbook operation, which Paulie notes is short of the required pay. And while Chris tries to convince Paulie that this is just a minor setback, Paulie tells him to pay him an extra $2K on top of the other cash that he owes him. Tony meets Jackie Jr. at Artie's restaurant, who talks with him about his uncle, Richie April. Tony knows for a fact that Jackie Jr. thinks that Tony had Richie quit, so he lies to Jackie and says that Richie was a rat, and tells Jackie that his father never wanted Jackie to get into any of the mob business, saying that he could become a doctor at Rutgers, as Jackie conveniently leaves out the fact that he dropped out of Rutgers. Interestingly, Tony says that he also doesn't want his kid to get involved with the business. As we cut to AJ at football practice, where the show continues one of my favorite traditions, making the parents of the Little League games act absolutely apeshit.
Are you fucking crazy, Ralph? Are you fucking crazy? What? I get my hands on you, I'll rip your fucking heart out.
We get another round of this as AJ is finally called into the field, and the yellow team fumbles the ball as everyone waits in anticipation to see who managed to snag it up. Tony celebrates this win with AJ and offers to take him to get some hot dogs, and declines AJ's offer to smoke his ass in Mario Kart 64 again, much to AJ's chagrin. At dinner, AJ fucks up and spills milk at the table, and they talk about what college AJ might go to, with Tony referencing a scene back in season 2 where AJ said he'd want to go to either West Point or Harvard. AJ reveals in this scene that he's had enough of his existentialism arc and is instead transitioning to his demotivation arc, as he says that he can never make it into West Point and asks if they can eat with a TV on. Meadow calls the house and tells Tony to fuck off so she can talk with Carm, as Janice helps with Svetlana to move her things out of the house. She apologized to her for how she acted at the funeral, but Svetlana sees right through this and tells Janice that she's keeping those records. records. And Janice leaves the room to try another way to get the records back. Wait, Janice, no, 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 no! Chris rants and raves to Adriana about how the bird in the window was a bad omen and that it was the reason why Chris's luck hasn't been great so far. And while Adriana tries telling him that ravens represent death and not bad luck, Chris is still stressed the hell out as his old person device starts beeping off again. Svetlana wakes up the next morning and realizes that Janice stole her prosthetic leg, and she uses some choice words to describe Janice before calling Irina and telling her of the news. We cut to a scene of Chris beating the piss out of this guy and telling him to get his money. And we cut back to Svetlana walking around in crutches, as Tony walks inside to help with the matter. Much to Tony's disappointment, he notices Irina is there as well. And Irina goes, "Hi, Tony," before Tony brushes her off and tells Svetlana that he'll reach out to Janice soon. Tony goes over to the fridge to get some beer and some gabagool. As he stares at the gabagool, however, he starts to get a flashback to his youth, where he watches his father Johnny and a much younger Junior take Satriel to the back of the pork store. Johnny demands Tony to get back in the car as him and Junior beat the hell out of Satriel for not making his payments on time. They force him to the table and cut off his pinky with a cleaver. With Tony witnessing the scene behind the doors, Johnny yells at him once again to get back in the car. And we cut to Melfi's office, where it's revealed that Tony was telling the story to her. Tony continues on with a flashback, with Johnny talking with Tony later that night about what happened. He tells Tony that, while Satriel is a nice man, he still owed him money, telling Tony that this is his livelihood, and warns Tony to never ever gamble in his life. A habit that Tony definitely won't take on and let nearly ruin his life later on in the show. Tony says cool okay as he watches Livia and Johnny get turned on in parts of the free meat sent over from Satriel's. And they awkwardly dance all sensually in front of the kids before cutting into the meat, which causes little old Tony to faint.
4 stitches. We're on dinner.
Melfi tells Tony that the connection between the meat and Tony's panic attacks has finally been made. As Melfi says that this combination of Tony witnessing his mother and father's sexuality along with all the violence and bloodshed he witnessed at Satriel's in tandem with the food he was about to eat caused him to short circuit, along with the thought that Tony would someday need to fulfill the same roles his father does. Tony says that all this is crazy and too much to process. And Melfi stops the session here and says that they've made great progress today, fulfilling Tony's earlier request of seeing more change, and telling him to write down any thoughts or associations. Tony watches a football game with AJ as Carm says she's going off to meet Meadow at college, and AJ asks if he can come with, to Tony's disappointment. Tony asks if he can come along too, but Carm tells Tony that she doesn't want him making a scene at the risk of alienating Meadow. And Tony insists that he was only trying to protect Meadow and says, "Fuck you, I'm staying here and watching the game." Junior watches the football game all pissed off as Chris also watches the football game all pissed off. And Carm and AJ head to Meadow's room, where Meadow and Noah are sitting together. Meadow very quickly shifts the conversation over to Tony's racist comments as Carm sends AJ out of the room, with Noah commenting that Tony's lucky that Noah didn't punch his lights out, which, like, no. Carm says that there's no excuse for Tony's comments and asks Meadow if she only brought Noah over because she was expecting Tony so they could have a big dramatic spat. But Meadow brushes this off and rants about how much of a dick Tony is. Carm tries to claim that Tony only acts this way because he comes from a time and place where he thinks he has her best interest at heart.
Noah, I'm sure you must know what I'm talking about. Coming from a racially mixed marriage, I'm sure that's been a difficult burden to shoulder.
Don't slam his family background. Look what you wound up in.
Noah leaves the room as Carm tells Meadow not to air out any other family business. And Meadow tells Carm that she's going to be going on a trip with Noah soon as Carm leaves. AJ watches some nerds at college while waiting for Carm as Janice comes back to the house, where Svetlana calls her a and says she's still not giving her the records as Janice acts all coy and passive-aggressive. Chris meets Jackie Jr. at a pizza shop to discuss the coffee house operation. But Jackie says the idea is canned for now since Dino is currently in the can, and mentions a charity benefit at Rutgers that they were gonna rob, which perks Chris and Benny's ears. AJ talks about how he doesn't want to go to college since everyone there is weird and leaves the table early, as Chris and Benny disguise themselves to rob the charity benefit. And Jackie nearly pisses himself while waiting as they rob the place and run back to the car. Jackie fools around once they get back as we cut to Chris the next day, who gives Paulie this week's cut in full. And he complains about how being a maid guy is really hard as Paulie says no shit Sherlock and kicks him out of there. Paulie later meets Tony at Artie's restaurant, where he says that Chris did well this week despite a few knots, and tells Tony about the Rutgers incident and how Chris was responsible for that, saying Jackie Jr. put him onto it. Tony gets pissed at this since he told Chris to his face to leave Jackie Jr. out of any funny business, and starts calling Chris as Chris ignores it and exhaustedly lies in bed. AJ is named defensive team captain by his football coach for the great play he made the week before. And just like his father did all those years ago when the thought of leadership caused him to faint to the ground, AJ does so as well, ending the episode. This was a pretty good episode. I really enjoy the plotline of Chris learning the ropes of being a made guy and how it's not as squeaky clean like it is in the movies. And I thought the flashbacks this time around were far more interesting and engaging than the ones we saw back in season 1. It's a lot more interesting to see a flashback where we see why a character exhibits behaviors that they do in the present and what caused them, rather than just being like, guess what? Livia was an asshole back then too! Isn't that crazy? The slow motion moment of Tony celebrating one of AJ's rare W's was hilarious and prime gift material. And I like how the episode properly introduces Jackie Jr. as an important side character with the whole Rutgers ordeal. Overall, I'm feeling a beats here for this episode. Season 3, Episode 4, Employee of the Month. Oh boy. I usually don't give, content warnings during these things because I assume most of you have seen the show already and can handle mature topics. But this particular episode has garnered a lot of infamy for containing one of the most intense and graphic moments in all of The Sopranos. So if you want to skip this segment, I wouldn't exactly blame you. I won't be showing the scene in the segment, but I will be describing what happens and the fallout that occurs from it. Anyways, let's begin. The episode begins with Irina calling the house being all flirtatious and telling Tony that Svetlana still hasn't gotten her leg back. But Tony tells her to shut her face and never call the house again. It's revealed that Melfi ended up taking Richard back, along with his endless, constant critiques of Melfi's choice to treat Tony as a patient, saying that gangsters are giving Italian Americans a bad name and that Tony's never going to change because he's a sociopath and all that, basically retreading the same material we were subjected to in season 1. Melfi tells Richard that she and Tony had a breakthrough last week as we cut to Melfi's office, where Tony reveals that he hasn't written down any recent thoughts of anxiety or past panic attacks, and Melfi criticizes him, saying that if he's gonna demand more from her, she's gonna demand more effort from Tony, which he clearly doesn't want to do as he refuses Melfi's suggestion to have Carmela come along with him in these sessions. He starts rambling on about how lazy AJ is as we cut to Melfi meeting with Elliot, who admits that Richard was right and that her patient really can't be helped, and begins chastising herself for leaving Richard for doing the right thing and protecting Melfi from danger.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be safe, Jen. It's a basic human need.
I know Richard's right. I should get Tony Soprano.
Whoops!
Oh, shit.
Elliot tells Melfi that she's done all that she can for Tony and that it's time for him to start seeing a behaviorist. And Janice continues searching around the house for Livia's supposed money stash as Tony angrily pounds on the door, demanding Janice to give Svetlana's leg back. Janice claims that the records are special and a reflection in Livia's soul, but Tony calls her out and says she's just gonna sell them online and makes fun of her for trying to find Livia's lost gold mine in the basement. Jackie Jr. has dinner at Artie's restaurant with his soon-to-be stepdad Ralphie, who teases Jackie for having the hots for Adriana and tells Jackie that Meadow may be up for grabs. And the two talk about Jackie's stick-up with Chris and how awkward things are right now with Ralphie dating his mom, Rosalie. But they quickly solve this issue by beating the shit out of this guy that owes Ralphie money. We're given a taste in the Ralphie's wise-ass approach to the mob world as he mocks and provokes the man into a fight, and gives Jackie Jr. a taste by splitting the cash 50-50. What nice bonding. We're introduced to Johnny Sack's wife, Ginny Sack, who's busy moving stuff into their new house.
John! John, get down here! You got company!
The actress who plays Ginny Sack gives some of my favorite line deliveries in the whole show, like the one you just witnessed. John, get down here! You got company! She's not even a particularly funny character, but the acting gives her so much personality and makes her stand out in my mind so much. Apparently, the lady who played the character wasn't even a professional actress or anything. She just showed up to support a friend on auditions for the show and ended up getting casted herself, which is really surprising to me. Anyways, Tony gives John a gift as they talk about him moving to New Jersey. And Tony gets annoyed that he didn't tell him that he was moving here. But John insists that he's not trying to stick his beak into any funny business. Later, Tony and Furio meet with Ralphie to discuss funny business, where Tony mentions the fact that Ralphie beat the piss out of that dude from earlier and chastises him for bringing Jackie along. But Ralphie says that Jackie's got a chip on his shoulder and that he's just trying to get closer with him. And the two talk about parenthood and how difficult it all is. Tony tells Ralphie that he's not promoting him to captain, giving the job to Gigi instead due to Ralphie's abrasive and violent tendencies. A decision that bums Ralphie out immensely. Melfi tells Tony that he's ready to move on to behaviorist therapy. A decision that bums Tony out even more as he criticizes Melfi for pawning him off to someone else. But Melfi claims that she's just introducing the idea for him to consider at a later date. Alright, this is where the really bad stuff begins. Melfi talked with Richard on the phone about how her meeting with Tony went, when she passes by a seemingly unsuspecting man in the hallway. As she puts her stuff in her car, however, the man comes back and grabs her from behind and threatens to cut her with a knife if she doesn't cooperate. And while she manages to get away for a brief moment, the man beats her to the ground and drags her in the stairwell, and rapes Melfi as she screams at the top of her lungs for him to stop. I'm obviously not going to be showing any of this here. All you need to know is that it's brutal, terrifying, and deeply disturbing, and treats the subject matter with the realism and maturity that it requires. Melfi is taken to the hospital, where Richard comforts her as she shows him the terrible sprain she got in her leg. The detective says they found a man with a description Melfi gave them, who Richard points out has an Italian name, Rossi, as Jason enters the room, who is understandably furious about the situation as Richard tells him to leave the room to settle down. Melfi later calls the Soprano residence and tells Carmela that she has to cancel her next appointment with Tony, claiming that she got into a car accident. Melfi continues canceling other appointments as Carm tells Tony about Melfi's car accident. And Tony mentions that Melfi said Carm could come into therapy at some point, which Carm says that she'll consider. Melfi recovers on the couch as Richard gets a call from the detective, who informs Richard that they had to let the suspect go due to them screwing up the chain of custody, and Richard angrily swears at them and hangs up. Melfi tells him to call them again so that she can talk to them, but the detective tells Melfi the same thing she said to Richard, which leaves Melfi stunned. Richard says that she needs to have someone walk with her to her car at night, and Melfi points out that it wasn't late, which leads to Melfi assuming that Richard thinks it's her fault and begins to point the blame on the Richard for causing this, saying that if he didn't call her about Tony, she would have noticed the man walking by her on the stairs, and also points out how Richard's ears perked up when he found out the suspect had an Italian name, claiming that any misdeed by any Italian somehow damages his self-esteem, and tells Richard to go fuck himself as she leaves. While Melfi is obviously wrong to direct her anger onto Richard, as there was no way he could have known that this would have happened to Melfi, I still think that she has a point about him trying to protect his own self-esteem. Like, imagine if something terrible had happened to your significant other, and your biggest concern in that moment isn't the fact that they might have caught the criminal, but the fact that he might have a background that hurts your feelings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think sitting by your recovering wife in a hospital room after such a horrific incident is a good time to preserve your own ego. Maybe he really was just surprised since Melfi initially said he was Puerto Rican, but considering the fact that 90% of his scenes in this show involve him talking about his heritage, I'm personally inclined to believe that it wasn't just him being surprised. We cut to the Bing, where newly appointed Capo Gigi tells Tony that Ralphie pretended like it was his idea to make him captain, and that they talked about Johnny Sack moving to Jersey with Ginny, which prompts the rest of the crew to make a plethora of jokes about a certain aspect of Ginny Sack's physical appearance.
She's so fat, her blood type is ragu.
She's so fat she goes camping. The bears have to hide their food.
When Ginny holds ass, she's got to make 2 trips.
Two guys can fuck her at the same time and still never meet.
Oops!
Oh, Johnny!
Johnny asks what's so funny, and Tony quickly says that they're just talking about one of the girls, as Johnny forces them to watch some boring news piece. And we cut to Melfi's room, where Richard and Melfi apologize to each other, saying that they're both frustrated about this whole ordeal. The FBI listen in on Tony and Chris's conversation, where Tony tells Chris that he specifically told him not to involve Jackie Jr. in any funny business. And while Chris tells Tony that Jackie Jr. did a good job, Tony says, "No, stop it, no." And Chris calls Tony a hypocrite, saying that it's fine for Chris to join, but not Jackie Jr. Tony tells Chris that Jackie Jr. isn't like them, and that he promised Jackie Aprile that he wouldn't let Jackie get involved, and tells Chris that he's a good kid. I believe that Tony is so initially adamant on keeping Jackie Jr. out of the game because of how he watched Jackie Aprile wither away in a hospital bed, and the impact this left on him caused him to be more open to helping Jackie out, emotionally speaking. Melfi has a difficult time walking up the stairwell as she meets with Tony again, using a cane to walk, which shocks Tony. She makes up several details about her car accident, and she hands Tony a pamphlet on behavioral therapy, which Tony makes fun of as Melfi's cane falls to the floor, intensely startling her. Tony talks about how frustrating it is that people can just get hurt by someone for no reason. And while Melfi agrees with this, she still tells Tony that he still shouldn't lose control over his feelings of anger and revenge, and that behavioral therapy can help him pinpoint the triggers of his panic attacks. Tony later talks to Jackie Jr., and while Jackie tries to talk business, Tony confronts him over the Rutgers stick-up, mentioning how Jackie lied about going to college, and telling Jackie that he promised his old man that he wouldn't let him get involved in the business. Meadow interrupts the conversation to ask Tony for money and rile him up by saying that she has lots of black friends at Columbia, and looks at Jackie Jr. happily before he leaves, with Tony warning him not to go any further in the mob. Melfi orders some food at a restaurant, when all of a sudden, she notices a picture of her rapist on the wall, revealing him to be the employee of the month, which leaves Melfi shocked as she quickly leaves the restaurant. We cut to Janice's place, where Janice gets the piss beaten out of her by 2 Russian guys who demand for Svetlana's leg back. And Janice retrieves the leg from a locker while calling the Russian dudes callous, as they rightfully call her callous. Melfi has a strange dream later that night, where we get this really cool shot of her working at her desk late at night before walking over to a door labeled "High Voltage, call NJGE" before digging. When she opens the door, she sees herself ordering a soda from a vending machine in the same office, using pieces of macaroni to order. When she reaches to grab the can, however, she finds her arm stuck inside, and she sees a Rottweiler barking at her as one of the pieces of macaroni falls down from the return slot. Melfi's rapist appears in the dream, and as it seems like Melfi is about to be attacked, the Rottweiler attacks her rapist, and Melfi wakes up from the dream. She later tells Elliot that she felt relief for the first time since her attack after the dream, and says that the vending machine represented the guilt she felt for putting herself in harm's way. She also notes how the sign said call NJGE before digging, NJGE being New Jersey Gas and Electric, and starts putting the pieces together, saying that while she thought the Rottweiler was beginning to attack her at first, it ended up attacking her rapist, and notes that there's one other person in her life that she both considers dangerous and also digs, Tony Soprano. She begins to rant about her rapist, as well as the satisfaction she feels knowing that she could have him killed at any moment. Tony meets Janice in the hospital, who criticizes Janice for always causing so much trouble in his life, as Janice acts like she's having a reawakening. She says that she's starting to feel closer to God despite being Buddhist, and says that her stealing a woman's prosthetic leg must have been caused by Richie's sudden death. Though we all know that this is not true, considering what Junior said about her stealing money from him when she was only a child. And Tony tells her to cut the bullshit and walks her out of the hospital. Johnny holds a housewarming party as Chris and Adriana make out in front of everybody. And Ralphie starts quoting Gladiator in front of the guys, which Silvio makes fun of him for. Ralphie walks away as Tony looks at him talking with Johnny, which makes Tony very suspicious. In the final scene of the episode, Tony meets with Melfi, telling her that he's been considering going to behavioral therapy as per Melfi's suggestion, saying he's gotten the feeling that she's giving him the boot. However, Melfi realizes that losing Tony as a patient would mean she would lose the protection she would have with him around, and begins to cry in front of Tony, who walks across the room to comfort her. She tells Tony to sit back down, and Tony asks Melfi if she wants to say something to him as we get this amazing close-up of Melfi's expression, as she considers whether or not to tell Tony the truth. After a long moment of silence, Melfi finally gives her response.
No.
Employee of the Month is one of those episodes that leaves you absolutely speechless. While we all wanted to see Melfi's rapist get the justice he deserves, it's also important to note just how badly this would have messed up Melfi's character as well as her dynamic with Tony had she gone through with having him murdered. It not only would have contradicted the lesson she's trying to teach Tony about not letting his thoughts of anger and revenge cause him to lose control, but it also would have made her a part of the game. It doesn't matter how much Tony personally cares for her, once she's in, and she would have been in Tony's pocket for the rest of the series, which would have caused their sessions to be way more restricted as well as any progress in improving Tony's mental state to halt. And yes, while a scene where Tony tracks down the rapist and murders him would have been fantastic, it would have come at the cost of one of the greatest dynamics in television history. And I personally believe, in Melfi's point of view, that the thought of Tony being there for her at any moment was enough for her to justify not going through with the murder, at the cost of preventing further help for Tony by stopping him from going to a behavioral therapist. This episode is considered by many Sopranos fans to be one of the best episodes from the show, and I thoroughly agree with that sentiment. While it still contains the Sopranos' sense of humor, what with all the fat jokes towards Ginny, as well as Janice getting absolutely pummeled by the Russian guys, the tone of this episode is noticeably darker, given the intense subject matter. I've never seen a show handle such a difficult topic with such brilliant candor, while still respecting the heaviness of the subject matter on top of being extremely well written. I strongly believe that Lorraine Bracco should have won the Emmy for this episode instead of Edie Falco, though Edie Falco still did a great job. That look at the end that she gives to Tony is just seared into my memory. You know that she wanted to spill her guts to Tony in that moment. Before I go any further, I want to go back to the dream sequences for a brief moment, as there's a few elements that I want to touch on that weren't addressed in Melfi and Elliot's meeting. The soda machine calls back to when Melfi spilled her soda after finding out that her rapist was named Employee of the Month at the restaurant. I believe that the use of pieces of macaroni in this scene represent Italian heritage, as it not only calls back to Richard's obsession with how Italian Americans are seen by the general public, but it also represents Tony Soprano, another figure in Melfi's life who frequently comments on the public image of Italian Americans. Going back to the overall episode, Lorraine Bracco's acting throughout is absolutely incredible, portraying a character overwrought with trauma and fear perfectly. This obviously couldn't have been an easy experience for Lorraine Bracco, and the fact that she was able to portray her character in such a difficult state of mind with flying colors is nothing short of unbelievable. So many little moments of her acting stick out in my mind, from her walking up the stairs after the incident in fear, to her jumping intensely after hearing her cane fall to the floor, even the moment at the end where she accidentally lets out a cry while talking with Tony and quickly catching herself, paralleling the scene where she accidentally revealed the name of her patient to Elliot. Containing both funny moments, incredible writing, and an absolutely harrowing performance by Lorraine Bracco, Employee of the Month is a strong highlight in an already strong show. I wouldn't personally put this as one of my absolute total favorites, but it's still earning a very high spot on this list. I'm giving this episode a strong S tier. Season 3, Episode 5, Another Toothpick.
Woke up this morning, got myself another.
Toothpick begins with Carmela and Tony finally participating in therapy together. Things start off really awkward as Carmela comes busting out of the gate criticizing Melfi for not being effective due to the fact that it's been 3 years and Tony's still having his whoopsie-daisy moments. But Melfi brushes this off and tries to get a conversation going about Tony's potential triggers in the current family dynamic, which quickly devolves into Carmela getting really defensive and criticizing Tony for banging Irina behind her back.
Silence, anger, and then you pass out and you blame the rest of the fucking world.
Yeah, I love you too.
You're both very angry.
Yeah, you must have been at the top of your fucking class.
Tony fools around back to the house as Carmela complains about the fact that Melfi was picking on her, even though she really wasn't. And Tony gets frustrated and fools around a little too hard and gets pulled over by a cop. Tony tries to bribe the cop, but the cop calls his bluff and tells him to wait in the car. And Tony says some shit about how he hates black people as the show cuts to Vito's brother Brian getting the absolute tar beaten out of him by this insane douchebag trying to protect his girlfriend with a golf club. The guys meet up with Vito in the hospital, who claims that Brian is gonna end up a vegetable. And Jackie Jr. sits by the side going, "Yeah, mafia stuff, I'm in this, let's beat him up, right guys?" But Tony and Paulie tell him to go back to the kids' table and leave. The guys discuss what needs to be done about who did this, named Mustang Sally. And Ralphie makes some intentionally ill-timed jokes to provoke everyone in the room. They say they told the cops they don't know who did it as they plan to handle Mustang Sally with extreme fucking prejudice. And they leave the room as we cut to a face that we haven't seen in a hot minute, Father Phil, as he honors the life of Carmela's Uncle Febby as Tony notices Bobby Bacala Sr. at the funeral, the coughing fit of a father of Bobby Bacala. Father Phil awkwardly talks with Carmela for a moment before Bacala Sr. happily meets with Tony. Tony tells Bacala Sr. about the incident with Mustang Sally, who happens to be Bacala's godson, though he claims it was only as a favor for Sally's father. And Tony gives Bacala the okay to do whatever he wants to Sally as Bacala starts making fun of Junior to his face.
That makes me laugh, your uncle. That's right, we're talking about you, you cagey fuck.
Huh?
Bacala Sr. says goodbye to Tony as Tony talks with Junior about how sick Bacala Sr. is, with Junior mentioning that he got lung cancer from smoking cigarettes for most of his life. And we cut to Artie's restaurant, where Artie celebrates with Adriana over a nice night of profits. As he's about to pour the two a glass of wine, however, Adriana tells Artie that Chris doesn't want her working at Vesuvio anymore. And Artie allows tonight to be her last shift, which dampens Artie's mood a bit as Adriana happily leaves to go collect her things. Bobby and Junior play a really depressing game of checkers as Bobby says he's sad about the fact that Tony okayed his dad to do the hit on Sally, since Bacala Sr. has been retired for 7 years and has gotten much weaker with the cancer. Bobby starts crying a bit and says that he'll do the hit himself if Tony wants. But Junior tells him to save his tears and says he'll do something to try to convince Tony that this is a bad idea. Later, however, Tony insists that this is a good idea as him and Junior talk in Junior's lawyer's office. And while Junior tells Tony that Bacala Sr. is a sick old man, Tony tells him that Mustang Sally's been MIA for 2 days and reached out to his godfather, who happens to be Bacala Sr., meaning he can pull off the hit without arousing any suspicion. Chris and Tony have dinner at Artie's place, where a definitely sober Artie comes out of the kitchen to talk with Chris.
Best hostess I ever had. This piece of shit steals her away.
Artie, come on, huh? Oh, come on. He knows I'm breaking his balls.
Chris and Artie start having a subtle argument with each other before Chris immediately dials it to an 11 and threatens to impale his eye with a fork. And Tony tells Chris to eat a dick as he asks Artie what the fuck is wrong with him. To which Artie says that he loved Adriana and that Charmaine is a and Tony tells him to calm the hell down and get some sleep at home. Tony later calls Assemblyman Zellman, who showed up to Livia's funeral a few episodes ago, to straighten out his speeding ticket. And Junior later claims to Bobby that he never even called Tony about his father, proclaiming that Bacala Sr. knows that the mob life always comes with responsibilities. Junior grabs some big nut out of the sink as he helps Bacala Sr. over with his dirty garbage disposal hands to sit down. And Junior realizes that he might have been wrong about his responsibilities speech as he watches Bacala Sr. cough up blood in front of him. But while he insists on calling off the hit, Bacala Sr. insists that he wants to do it, saying that he's basically dead anyways as Bobby leaves the room crying while Bacala Sr. continues spitting up Kool-Aid. Charmaine tells Artie that teaming up with Satriels is a horrible idea and that teaming up with mobsters for business is a guaranteed disaster. And while Artie continues trying to convince her to expand, Charmaine ignores him and says to count his blessings before they hatch, or whatever the quote is. Ralphie continues quoting Gladiator of Vesuvio as they start talking about the controversial decision of having Bacala Sr. pull the hit. And Tony asserts his dominance and says that his call is final as Ralphie acts like a dick and provokes Gigi and the rest of the guys. Tony finds out while looking for some pipes that the policeman who pulled him over is working at the place. And the former policeman tells Tony that the assemblyman had him demoted as a result of Tony's ticket. And Tony tells him that he didn't tell the assemblyman to do that as the former policeman tells him to suck his dick. Tony later calls Assemblyman Zellman and tells him that demoting the policeman seems kinda harsh. But Zellman tells Tony that nobody really liked the guy anyway as Tony looks disappointed. Bacala Sr. finally pulls off the hit as he heads over to Mustang Sally's house. And he struggles his way into the house as Sally and his friend help him in. Sally apologizes to Bacala for what he did as Bacala reassures him that he managed to get him a pass. And Sally happily thanks Bacala for this favor as he goes to get a cup of water for him. And Bacala starts slowly walking up to Sally with his gun while talking to him.
Oh, what the fuck?
After all the struggling, Bacala smokes a cigarette and teases Sally's friend a bit before shooting him square in the face, and drives back home, still covered head to toe in blood and coughing like he has lung cancer or something. He watches a police car drive by as he tries to reach for his inhaler, but it falls on the ground as he continues hacking up a lung before losing consciousness and falling asleep at the wheel and crashing and dying. Bacala Sr. has got to be one of the best one-off characters in The Sopranos. He came in, coughed a bunch, killed 2 people, smoked, and died. The American fucking dream. While this scene was incredibly entertaining to watch, Bobby is a lot less entertained, as he cries a bunch on the couch while Junior resents Tony for allowing Bacala Sr. to do the hit despite several warnings. Junior tries asking if Bobby knew what the cause of his death was, theorizing that the cancer might have gotten to him first and not the pole that he was driving 60 miles per fucking hour at, and says that Bacala Sr. was a good man as he calms down.
Motherfucker! God damn it!
Artie continues losing his mind as he insists to Charmaine that he is going into business with Tony. And while Charmaine continues saying that this is a stupid idea, Artie goes, "You know what? You're right, Charmaine. I'm way too over my head with all of this. I'm gonna go back into the kitchen and cook up some food."
What? What are you gonna do? Divorce me?
Artie, what are you doing?
Charmaine tells Artie this marriage is over as everyone in the restaurant uncomfortably looks over at Artie. What a mood killer, hashtag divorce. Tony brings AJ over to see Junior at the hospital, and AJ gets sent out to leave for the 14th fucking time this season by Junior so he can talk to Tony privately. And while we and Tony think he's about to chastise Tony for letting Bacala do the hit, we find out that Junior himself has cancer, explaining the out-of-nowhere outburst earlier, along with a weird question about Bacala's cancer. And also, like, everything else this season. Junior tells Tony that he got tested the day before Livia's wake, as Tony says how shocked he is and hugs Junior, with Junior saying that this stays between them. Junior also mentions that cancer comes in threes, since Jackie Aprile, Febby, Bacala Sr., and now Junior had it. And Tony finds out that the real reason Junior didn't want Bacala making the hit was so that Bacala would somehow take his place so he'd die of cancer or not Junior. Once again explaining the weird question he asked Bobby about the cancer, which is equal parts hilarious and horrible. Junior once again demands Tony not to say this to anyone, and Tony keeps up this promise.
Hello?
Uncle June's got cancer.
Tony wastes no time talking with Janice about how screwed up things have been with all the deaths in the family, as Janice calls Uncle Junior another toothpick, something that Livia used to say as her and Tony laugh over how terrible Livia was. Janice talks about her reawakening with God, as well as the connections with the comes in threes Junior said earlier, along with the Holy Trinity, and asks Tony out of nowhere what happened to Pussy, to which Tony lies and said he went into witness protection. And Janice offers to pray with him before Tony gets up and leaves. The FBI listen in to Carmen Meadow talking about her bike that was stolen a few weeks back, and Carm decides to stir the pot by mentioning it was a black guy who stole it. And Meadow looks over at Tony sternly as Tony grabs some orange juice from the fridge with the biggest shit-eating grin in history. Tony makes a boatload of facetious remarks to Meadow, and Carm tells Tony to shut up as him and Meadow start arguing with each other over crime and racism, with Tony quoting FBI statistics as if those aren't the exact same people trying to put him in jail, as the FBI realizes that somebody brought the lamp up to the kitchen. While Meadow tells Tony that crime is an economic issue and not a racial one, Tony goes, "Rah, black people, rah," as Meadow angrily leaves the house, bringing the lamp lamp along with her, which causes the FBI guys to shit their pants. Artie unbelievably goes out to dinner with Adriana, as he tries his best to make Adriana fall head over heels with him by wearing one earring. He also tells Adriana that his marriage is starting to fall apart, wink wink wink, and also talks about him going into business with Tony and how that's a great idea. Artie's like, man, marriage is really hard. You sure you want to do it with Chris? I mean, you know, marriage. Come on, just let me just, come on, you just gotta, let me just, Adriana quickly leaves the restaurant since Artie is fucking crazy as we cut to Tony and some other guys smoking cigarettes together at Vesuvio. Johnny leaves to go pee-pee as the assemblyman tells Tony that the policeman from earlier is bitching about losing his overtime, and how the assemblyman can get him reassigned if Tony wants. But Tony has a change of heart and says fuck that, likely due to the conversation that he had with Meadow. Harris tells the judge with piss in his pants that the wiretap has been neutralized, as Junior watches some beet rice videos while eating some grilled cheese, and tells Bobby that he can't come to the funeral because he's not really feeling like it. Bobby says he feels insulted and starts arguing with Junior, and Junior quickly folds and admits to Bobby that he has cancer. Junior goes, how's it feel, huh? And Bobby walks out of the room shocked, asking what on earth is going on. Tony tries once again to bribe the former police officer so he doesn't have to pay for his things, but the policeman once again denies Tony's attempt and walks away, as Tony walks away himself, ending the episode. This episode was absolutely fantastic, an extremely underrated one on rewatch. The amount of humor packed into this one is enough to make my head spin, what with the amazing scenes with Bobby and Junior, already losing his shit and coming off like a crazy person to everyone, Bacala's hit going awry, hell, just Bacala Sr. in general. Once again, such a great one-off character, he leaves such a strong impact. John Ventimiglia did an amazing job playing Artie in this episode. He does such a good job playing a seemingly normal man who, in reality, is on the cusp of absolutely losing his mind. Whoever did the casting for the show must have the eye of Providence or something. I probably don't need to mention this, but hey, they finally managed to tackle the subject of racism well. We actually get to see how it affects dynamics between characters and how other characters respond to and deal with it. You know what they say, third time's the charm. The writers probably assumed that the viewers needed a mental break after witnessing such a horrific and harrowing situation last episode, which might explain why the humor in this episode is a lot more prevalent. An extremely underrated episode. I was not going into this episode on rewatch expecting it to be this good. The humor is very strong, the action is really tense and exciting, and the acting is on point as well. I can't lie, I'm feeling a really strong S tier for this episode. Bravo, Burt Young. Season 3, Episode 6, University.
Woke up this morning.
Oh my god, how many people worked on the story? Silvio and Tony debate whether or not Yo-Yo Ma's real name is Yo-Yo Ma, as this girl, Tracy, a stripper at the Bing, walks up to Tony to tell him that her kid isn't sick like she thought, and gives Tony some bread as a thank you gift for his advice. Despite Tracy's nice behavior, however, Tony tells her that she can't be doing stuff like this because she's an employee, he's already got a wife and kids, and something about Ralphie that we'll be getting all too familiar with later. Ralphie talks with AJ about a violent scene from The Gladiator at family dinner, and Jackie Jr. shows up late and says hi to everyone and ignores Ralphie. He tells Carm to tell Meadow he said hi before booking it out of there, and Ralphie shit talks him once he leaves, saying Jackie Jr. had every advantage growing up while Ralphie had to drop out of school junior year to help his mother. We cut to university, teehee, where Noah and Meadow are pillow talking each other, and they start making out with each other before dumb Caitlin walks into the room, who's still going through her meltdown era as she talks about a horror movie she watched called Freaks, and talks about how scary it was as she starts pulling hair off her scalp, which Meadow says is not a particularly good idea. Noah leaves as things get really awkward as Caitlin apologizes for killing the vibe and cries about missing her ferrets back at home. And Meadow tells Caitlin she really needs to get her shit together as she leaves as well, taking a scalpel with her so Caitlin doesn't do anything rash. They go to Noah's room as Noah talks about how Caitlin probably isn't used to the mean streets of New England. The two go hee 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 before they start playing Battleship, and they both lose their V cards as we cut to the next day, where Meadow strolls around the house in a good mood as Carmela notes how happy-go-lucky she is. Meadow talks about how wonderful Noah is once Tony comes down, as well as how crazy Caitlin is. Meadow acts sarcastic to Tony, and Tony starts ranting again once she leaves the house as Carm ignores him. We cut to the Bing, where Paulie gives a legendary Sopranos one-liner.
Oh, look at that. It's like an ad for a fucking weight loss center. Before and way before.
This guy ever stop breaking balls?
Paulie tells Tony the exact same joke verbatim right before he gets his weenie worked on by a stripper. and Ralphie shows up to make the vibe a lot more awkward and tense than it needs to be. He goes up to Tracy and demands her to get him a drink despite her being nice to Ralphie. And Paulie warns Ralphie to cool it as Ralphie does the exact opposite, going up to Georgie and poking him with a cue stick while continuing to quote Gladiator. And he decides to push it one step further by grabbing a chain with a lock on the end of it and intimidating Georgie with it by swinging it around the place. Tony's blowjob is completely ruined at this point as Ralphie has officially murdered the vibe of the place. And he hits Georgie in the eye with a chain as he laughs at his injury. Tony tells Ralphie to fuck off and drive Georgie to the hospital. And Tracy asks Tony how he thought of her bread from earlier, and Tony ignores her and tells her to leave. Meanwhile, Caitlin continues to lose her mind as she annoys Meadow to the point of her leaving. And she talks with Noah about how crazy Caitlin is, with Noah pitching the idea of taking her out sometime to cheer her up. The two decide to cheer each other up by playing another round of Battleship. And Tony continues being mean to Tracy as she tries showing Tony her new braces, with Silvio also telling her to shut her yap and get back to work. Tony asks Silvio why she isn't pestering Ralphie to pay for her teeth, since Ralphie is the one currently having an affair with her. And Silvio says it's a loan as he mentions how ugly her chompers look now. Noah and Meadow take Caitlin out to take her mind off the crazy demons in her head as Caitlin notices a homeless woman walking the streets. And Caitlin rushes over to give her some money as the homeless lady bends over and reveals newspaper wrapped up between her butt cheeks, which makes Noah and Meadow sick and Caitlin traumatized for the 18th time this episode. Paulie compliments Chris on actually doing good with earnings this week.
Not bad, Chrissy. Decent week.
Not bad. I'm running ragged here. If I wanted to work 18 hours a day, I could get a job at Denny's.
Yeah, Chris is dodging a fucking bullet here. I heard through the grapevine that if you apply to work at Denny's, you'll get polio. Ralphie and the security guy play Battleship with Tracy, who does not look like she's having a good time. As Caitlin isn't having a good time either, as she recounts the horrific and traumatizing memory of seeing a homeless lady with newspaper up her poop hole. And while Meadow offers to take her to the health center, Caitlin says no more drugs as she downs a cup of vodka. Noah leaves the room as he tells Meadow, "Oh, by the way, I'm going on a trip that I didn't tell you about. See you later," leaving Meadow to deal with Caitlin herself. Meadow decides not to do that bullshit and heads home to rest instead, telling Carm about the whole situation along with Noah being weird and not telling her about the trip. And Carm tells Meadow that Jackie Jr. says hello and asks if she's in love with Noah. And Meadow says that she'd better be since they like fucked and stuff. I mean, whoops! Tracy stops Tony before he drives home to tell him that she's pregnant with Ralphie's baby, saying that she doesn't know what to do as Tony warns her that Ralphie isn't exactly going to be happy or caring over this news. He also tells her that, realistically, she should not be having another kid, especially at her age, and says that, with Ralphie as the father, she'd be doing her kid a favor if she terminated the pregnancy. Meadow plans a shopping trip with Carmela as crazy Caitlin barges into Noah's room and asks if she can study at his place, which Noah reluctantly obliges. Georgie later tells Silvio that Tracy has been out for 3 days, which pisses off Silvio. And crazy Caitlin tells Meadow how she's in a good mood and how she's going on a trip with family, blah blah blah. And Meadow goes, "Oh, would you look at the time?" and leaves to Noah's room. Ralphie shit talks a Gladiator movie Chris recommended on the couch with Tracy. And Noah rants about a C- he got in his paper because he was distracted by Caitlin while writing it, going,
"I'm going to law school, I can't deal with this shit."
And Meadow tells him to calm his tits and that it's early in the semester as we cut to Tracy at Ralphie's place, who talks to Ralphie about how wonderful life's gonna be with her and Ralphie taking care of her baby, deciding not to heed Tony's advice that Ralph is a fucking crazy person. Suddenly, Silvio comes knocking at the door and demands Tracy to get back to work and chastising her for spending time with Ralphie instead of her kid. Ralphie tells Silvio to knock it off with all this, but Silvio tells Ralphie to suck his cock and that Tracy is into him for over $3 grand, with Tracy mouthing off to him and insisting she can get a different job as Silvio slaps her across the face and tells her that she's his until she pays what she owes, with Ralphie laughing at Tracy's situation through the window like a psycho. Ralphie later has dinner at Rosalie's place with her and Tony and the gang, and Jackie Jr. goes to leave as Meadow meets Noah's dad, who's an entertainment lawyer, and talks about how he talked with Tim Daly for over an hour, a comment that's going to be very funny 2 seasons from now. Later, Noah and Meadow wait in line at the movies as Meadow tells Noah she feels bad since she promised Caitlin that she'd call her if they went. And it's revealed that Noah may be spoiled as he says his dad is getting him a restraining order against Caitlin, saying that he freaked out when he heard about the C-. Meadow goes, "Wow, that's crazy," as Noah says it's fine since she was ruining their lives anyway. As we cut to Ralphie telling jokes at the Bing to the guys. Tracy shit talks Ralphie in front of the guys, and they all laugh at Ralphie as he follows her to the outside of the Bing, damage ego and all. Ralphie asks why Tracy is acting rude to him, and Tracy mentions that he hasn't called her in 3 days. And Ralphie claims that he's busy with work and asks how else he's gonna help take care of Tracy and her kid. Ralphie starts sweet-talking Tracy and assuring her that things will be peachy keen with him and her in this really intense shot. But it turns out to just be him fucking around as he calls Tracy some really mean things. And Tracy spits at Ralphie and begins attacking him, and ends up punching him in the face really good. Tracy continues mocking Ralphie, asking if he feels like a real man now. And Ralphie goes full psycho mode and begins beating Tracy to the ground, knocking her out unconscious. Ralphie goes back into the Bing to place his hand in some ice, claiming that Tracy slipped on the ground and vaguely describes an argument that was happening between the two of them. When the guys go outside to see what happened to Tracy, they spot her lifeless corpse on the ground covered in dirt and blood, which upsets Tony and the guys greatly as Tony demands Ralphie to come outside. Ralphie continues acting all nonchalant about the situation as Tony chastises Ralphie for being a selfish asshole, saying that his behavior is the reason why he was passed over as captain. And Ralphie continues acting like he did nothing wrong as Tony beats the ever-loving piss out of Ralphie in this really satisfying scene, as the rest of the guys rush over to hide Tracy's body. Ralphie screams some shit about how he's a made guy before walking away, and Tony talks about how Tracy was only 20 years old before leaving the premises. Meadow studies with Noah at the library, and Noah decides that this is a great time to drop the bombshell that he's breaking up with Meadow, claiming that there's an underlying cynicism with every word she says. We cut to Melfi's office, where Carm and Tony meet together once again as Carm admits that things seem to actually be getting better with her and Tony as a result of these sessions. However, Tony is still in a bad mood due to the Tracy incident, and he talks about it with Melfi, though very vaguely. He claims that a guy in his crew died due to a work-related death, saying that it sucks to see someone die so young. Meadow goes back home in a really pissed off mood as Tony and Carm figure something must have gone down. And we cut to some strippers of the Bing, who all wonder what happened to Tracy as the show fades to black, ending the episode. Holy shit, this show cannot stop putting out banger episodes this season. University does so much with its shorter than average runtime, with some great character moments along with great moments in general, like stupid Caitlin getting traumatized by the homeless lady from Home Alone 2 making it clap. This episode once again displays the tremendous pacing of The Sopranos, as the episode starts with Noah and Meadow getting freaky and Tracy being nice and friendly, to Tracy getting killed by Ralphie and Noah revealing himself to be a spoiled weirdo and breaking up with Meadow. I like the way that this episode slowly peels back Noah's character and reveals his true colors. I know there are a lot of people who really don't like Noah, and while I personally didn't dislike him that much before, I gotta say, after this episode, I'm starting to lean that way a lot more. Move over, Chris. We got a real pump and dumper over here. Oh, come on, stop pretending. You know that was funny. This episode not only shows us the true colors of Noah, but also of a much, much bigger scumbag by the name of Ralphie, who really just lets loose this episode and shows how much he's willing to demonstrate his sociopathic tendencies, shit-talking everyone around him and never taking any situation with a hint of seriousness. We saw a bit of this last episode when he kept cracking jokes despite Vito's brother being in a coma, but the true Ralphie, in my opinion, appears in this episode. And that can especially be seen in Ralphie's final scene in this episode, when he murders Tracy in cold blood. This scene is brutal, and it really changes the way that you see Ralphie from this point forward. He's no longer just a rude weirdo who has no idea when to let a joke go. He's an actively malicious psychopath who will take whatever route possible to make his situation more convenient. This moment leaves a big impact on Tony, as Tracy was not only incredibly young, but also very sweet and caring to those around her. She was clearly a good person that happened to get involved with the wrong crowd, which could be seen throughout the episode as the rest of the guys kept ignoring her pleasant demeanor and demanding her to get back to work. Tony's sympathy toward Tracy is really interesting, as he takes his anger out on Ralphie and chastises him for what he's done, and later vaguely talks about it with Carm and Melfi during therapy. If it were any other employee at the Bing, then Tony probably wouldn't have given much of a shit. But the fact that Tracy was so sweet and innocent to Tony just for her to be murdered by stupid dumb asshole Ralphie likely hurt him personally, as she was a young kid who just needed someone better to redirect her in life. There's another very strong reason as to why Tony is so empathetic, but we'll get back to that later. Overall, this episode was incredibly good. I'm feeling a very strong S tier for this one. Season 3, Episode 7, Second Opinion. I made the Sopranos intro blue. It's blue now. The episode begins with Junior going under for surgery, where he hallucinates the FBI offering freedom from cancer at the cost of giving up his nephew to law enforcement, an offer that Junior happily accepts in the dream as he starts hallucinating things Livia and Tony said to him in the past. Afterwards, the doctor informs Tony and Bobby that Junior is officially cancer-free, and Tony tells the doctor that if there's any favor he needs, he'll take care of it for him, which the doctor says he'll keep in mind. Meanwhile, Paulie refuses to pay Chris for winning a game of pool, and while Chris criticizes Paulie for always flaking out of paying anything, Paulie defends himself and asks Chris if he's wearing a wire, forcing him to strip naked and have his ding dong bouncing around.
I guess you could call that a dick.
Tony is too busy grazing on a helpless chicken wing to do his duties as a father as his phone goes beep boop and forces him to leave, causing AJ to excuse himself to do some homework, which Carm's mom criticizes. She and Carm's dad criticize Tony's behavior as Carm notes that Tony's actually been better recently, bringing up them going to therapy together. But this only dampens their moods as Carm's mom brings up someone else Carm could have married and how he has a popular chain of drugstores now, which pisses off Carm and causes her to leave. She argues with her parents in the kitchen, pointing out that Tony has helped them get opportunities in the past as they both continue defending their anti-Tony stance. And we cut to the Bing, where Tony finds one of those talking fish singing on his desk, and Tony starts panicking, as the fish reminds Tony of another certain talking fish we saw last season. He projects all of his negative emotions from that situation onto the guy that brought the fish in, Georgie, and he gets beat up by Tony for at least the 6th time this series. We get a parallel shot from the pilot episode as Carm also stares at the statue of the lady with massive badoinkadoinks, as Carm gets called in by Melfi for her first solo session. Unlike Tony, who thought the paintings were out to make him have a mental breakdown, Carm actually compliments the paintings, though she says she doesn't like the statue. Carm talks to Melfi about Tony's constant mood swings, along with the fact that Tony refused to come along to the session today, which is why Carm is the only one present. They talk about Tony supposedly being distraught over the worker who died on the job, as Carm implies that Tony isn't giving his full side of the story, mentioning how he reports to a strip club as she begins to cry a bit. Melfi says that Carmela is having her feelings stirred as a result of these therapy sessions. And while Carm says that she's fine and only came today to vent, Melfi still refers Carm to a colleague of hers if she ever changes her mind. Junior meets with his doctor, who tells Junior that, while surgery went well, there were some cells that they didn't catch the first time around, and plans for Junior to have another surgery as Junior shits his pants. Carm goes to the grocery store to stare depressingly at some pot roast, when she runs into Angie Bompancero, who's doing relatively okay after Pussy let himself go for $4 a pound, and Carm offers to have her over for dinner. Angie claims that she can't come, as Carm points out that she can't keep relying on her dog as a source of social equanimity. And Angie thanks Tony for helping her with finances, as she complains about how she's been struggling with money lately. Later that night, Chris delivers some nice shoes to Adriana from a bunch of garbage bags, but they turn out to be actual garbage, as Adriana complains that they're size 10s and not 8.5s. But Chris says he'll get her replacements, as he complains about Paulie before playing kissy kissy with Adriana. Tony eats some of Carm's food from the fridge, as Carm complains about the fact that they haven't been eating together recently despite AJ and Meadow being gone, and mentions running into Angie at the supermarket earlier, which I'm sure made Tony feel wonderful, especially after the whole fish incident from earlier. Carm mentions that Angie needs money for surgery for her dog Coco, and Tony kicks off a wonderful piece of acting as he pretends to get angry over the FBI supposedly making Pussy go into witness protection without his wife, and tells Carmela that he doesn't want to hear about Pussy or his ungrateful wife again. Adriana tells Chris late at night about how she played Battleship with Penn from Penn and Teller once, and Chris nearly beats the shit out of her before they're both interrupted by aggressive knocking on the door, who turns out to be Paulie, who continues being a dick to Chris as he takes Chris's shoes that he got for Adriana. And Paulie pushes it way further than he should by looking through Adriana's clothes and smelling her panties, which starts to really piss off Chris. Carm waits around Meadow's room to deliver some laundry and food to her place, and talks to her about how she's going to lunch with a dean, as well as how she's been doing ever since stupid Noah went AWOL on her. And Meadow talks about how she lost Noah because of Tony, but shuts down the conversation when Carm asks her to delve deeper into the issue. After this, we're given one of the greatest Junior moments in all of The Sopranos.
Fucking bitch.
Tony asks what the hell is going on, as Junior mentions that he can't eat regular food on account of the surgery. And Junior asks what's wrong with Tony and Ralphie, saying that Tony's acting like Ralphie killed an innocent girl in cold blood or something. Tony brushes this off as Junior mentions Surgery 2 Electric Boogaloo. And while Tony asks if he should ask for a second opinion, Junior says that he trusts Dr. John Kennedy with every bone in his body, to which Tony says it's not really that impressive that the guy's name is John Kennedy. Junior calls Bobby a fat fuck and tells him to lay off the White Castles as he walks into the room. And Tony insists to Junior that he should really consider getting an opinion from another doctor, which Junior reluctantly agrees to. Once Tony leaves, however, Junior angrily rants to Bobby about how Junior was the only thing stopping Tony from running all of North Jersey, implying that Tony doesn't want Junior making a full recovery under the hands of former President John Kennedy. But Bobby tells him to stop being a pissy pants baby boy as we cut to Carm having lunch with a dean. The dean tells Carm about how good Meadow is doing at school as the show hard cuts to Tony beating the shit out of Angie's Cadillac with a baseball bat, and tells Angie that all money-related concerns go to Tony, not Carmela, which seems a bit harsh considering that they were just talking at a grocery store, but whatever. He also points out that she's driving a Cadillac and still asking for more cash, and Coco jumps out of Angie's arms and hops up and down for Tony, revealing that it may not be as sick as Angie implied as he pets her. The dean continues eating with Carm at lunch, and asks Carm for 50 grand to donate to the school, which Tony later finds out and is outraged by, giving only 5,000 to Carm to donate. Tony goes with Junior to see a second opinion from another doctor, who tells Junior that chemo might be in the books as Junior continues proclaiming Dr. Kennedy's superiority. And Tony later mocks Junior for having so much respect for the doctor just off of his name. Carm schedules an appointment with a therapist Melfi referred her to, Dr. Krakauer, as Tony goes outside to complain about the orange juice.
It says with pulp.
You like it with pulp.
Not this much. I like the one that says some pulp.
Some Pope? Why do you need another one? We just got a new one. Okay, now you're just hating. That was funny as fuck. AJ comes back from his field trip as Carm happily greets him back. And AJ has nothing significant to say about the trip other than the fact that there was a PS2 in his hotel room, which pisses off Tony. Carmela is equally pissed off at Tony as she says that Tony somehow has all the money to help Angie Bump and Ciero, but can't spring a bit more to help with their daughter's education. But Tony says he doesn't want to be extorted as he leaves back inside. Later, Chris complains to Tony about Paulie being an asshole to him, and mentions the panty sniffing from earlier, which makes Tony realize that Paulie's a little fucked up. Despite this though, Tony tells Chris to suck it up, Buttercup. And we cut to a scene of a bunch of doctors evaluating Junior's surgery, where this black spot similar to the one in the intro sticks around for a full minute as the doctors debate what methods they should use to help him. One of the doctors mentions to Kennedy that Junior got a second opinion, and Kennedy says that he doesn't want the little shit looking over his shoulder during surgery.
The girl said she'd page Dr. Kennedy. Where the fuck is he?
Where the fuck is he? Tony later confronts Paulie for going over the line at Chris's place.
You sniff that girl's panties? He told you that? Fucking baby.
Junior vomits from the chemo treatment he's taking, and complains to Tony about getting a second opinion, and claiming that Kennedy was right the first time, and how he can't get in contact with Kennedy either. Tony calls Kennedy's number himself as Junior gets up from the couch for round 2, and Chris gets his weenie wet with some prostitute as Paulie spots him and warns him that, if he can find him this easy, so can Adriana. He also warns Chris not to tell Tony about the things that happen between each other, and just when Chris thinks he's about to kill him or something, Paulie pulls out a singing fish like the one Tony beat Georgie up over at the Bing, saying that they need to bring one into the office as he plays it for Chris, rekindling their friendship over the timeless magic of a fish singing YMCA. Meanwhile, Tony and Furio drive a golf cart over to Dr. Kennedy, saying that he hasn't been responding to Tony's calls and bribing/intimidating him with a brand new titanium golf club in order for him to give Junior his attention again.
You gotta be on your at.
I love this show so much. John puts on a pouty face and reluctantly changes his schedule to focus on Junior, and Tony and Furio book it out of there. In this amazing scene, Carmela meets with Dr. Krakauer and talks with him about her emotionally unstable marriage with Tony, with Krakauer taking a no bullshit approach throughout the full meeting. When she mentions Tony cheating on her with other women constantly, Krakauer points out that this is probably one of the lesser of his sins, and advises that she leave Tony immediately, saying that she's essentially his accomplice. And while Carmela claims that she just puts food on the table, Krakauer goes, "Oh, so you're an enabler, I see." Krakauer says that not removing Tony from her life is only going to make Carmela's negative emotions brew more and more. And while Carm keeps trying to rationalize and downplay her situation, Krakauer continues telling Carmela that she needs to leave this marriage with the children as soon as she can, saying that he's not accepting any cash for this meeting due to the fact that it's blood money, and that Carmela shouldn't be accepting it either. This scene is such a great out-of-nowhere reality check by the show. Despite how relatable and entertaining the characters we watch in this show are, at the end of the day, they're still terrible people. And the gravity of Carm's situation is put on display beautifully by the blunt honesty of this scene. No fancy justifications, no in-depth descriptions of Tony's crimes, no glamorization. Just a frank, straightforward discussion, as well as a proper criticism of Carmela and her choices. There's a line that Krakauer says during this conversation that still sticks with me even on rewatch.
Take only the children, what's left of them, and go.
What's left of them? That cuts deep even as an audience member, so I can only imagine how Carmela feels. The actor who plays Dr. Krakauer in this scene does a really good job. Once again, another great one-off character offered to us by the show. Junior beams with excitement to see Dr. Kennedy again, who gives Junior his home number and assures that Junior's current procedure will go smoothly, which gives Junior a sudden boost of confidence. And Tony comes home to find Carmela sleeping on the couch, recovering from the subtle verbal beatdown she received from Dr. Krakauer. Tony suggests that Carm go to therapy herself, and Carm scoffs and says that she'll keep going to meetings with Tony. And also tells Tony that she promised the dean that they donate $50K to the school, and while Tony initially argues against it, Carm tells him that he needs to do something nice for her, and Tony reluctantly agrees to the donation. To combat against Carm's earlier "we don't eat together anymore" allegations, Tony offers to take her out to dinner, and despite Krakauer's advice to leave Tony as soon as she can, Carm continues to dabble in the mob lifestyle as she gets up from the couch to get ready, and Tony follows her from behind, ending the episode. This episode was pretty good. Despite the overall episode not exactly being my favorite, there were a ton of iconic Sopranos moments that originated from this episode, like Paulie and Chris laughing at the singing bass, "You gotta be on the act." Carm throwing the phone at Tony over orange juice, Junior spilling every ounce of juice from his blender, and of course, the amazing scene with Carmela speaking with Dr. Krakauer. I gotta give the episode some respect for the sheer amount of great moments it contains, but other than that, the whole thing isn't really much to write home about. I'm personally feeling a nice B tier for this one. Season 3, Episode 8. He is Risen. Oh great, I already used my one Pope joke. Caitlin is losing her mind at a college party with Meadow, saying that her depression is cured due to ecstasy that she got from Jackie Jr., who's at Columbia University for some reason, as the two share a look with each other. He walks up to Meadow and claims that he's in a frat at Rutgers and came up to visit, and gives Meadow some ecstasy for free as we cut to Ralphie playing a relaxing and friendly game of craps with the guys.
Read 'em and suck my dick!
Ralphie suddenly gets a lot less confident as Tony walks into the building, with Gigi criticizing Ralphie for not saying hello to him. And Ralphie reluctantly walks up to Tony and says hi. And the two have a really awkward conversation as Ralphie says he needs to go take out the dishes and walks out early. Paulie suggests just getting it over with and killing Ralphie, but Tony says to chill out and that he just wants to enjoy himself as Meadow enjoys herself with Jackie Jr. Jackie's impatient ass tries to get some action going as Meadow tells him to stop, and Meadow falls asleep as Jackie keeps trying his damnedest, with no luck. Tony and Silvio talk about how disrespectful Ralphie was to Tony the other night, and they debate whether or not to keep him in the crew, saying that, while he's a loose cannon, he is an extremely good earner. Silvio tells Tony that he shouldn't have punched Ralphie that night, saying that Ralphie now has a legitimate beef with Tony since Ralphie is a made guy and that, while Tracy's murder was a tragedy, she wasn't one of Tony's Gumars or related to Tony by blood, so it wasn't that bad. Silvio tells Tony that he either needs to kill Ralphie or make up to him in some way. And while Tony says there's absolutely no way he's apologizing, Silvio says that he needs to do something to make it seem like there's no bad blood, like promoting Ralphie to captain, which Tony also says fuck no to. Meanwhile, Ralphie is also talking with the crew over the situation, saying that Tony had no right to hit him over Ralphie killing some hua.
But all this over some dead hua.
Ralphie says that there's no way he's going over to Tony's for Thanksgiving now as we cut to the Bing the next day, where the Reverend comes over to help collect some stolen turkeys as Hedge talks with Tony about Ralphie. And Tony frustratedly remembers the fact that Ralphie's supposed to come over for Thanksgiving. Jackie and Meadow talk to their respective parents about who's coming over for Thanksgiving, with Meadow asking if Jackie's gonna be there and Jackie asking if Meadow's gonna be there. Rosalie calls up Carm right after hanging up on Meadow, with Carm noting that Meadow asked if Jackie's coming as Rosalie notes that Jackie asked if Meadow's coming. Oh my lord, this paragraph. Rosalie says that those two would make a hell of a child as Carm hangs up and Tony bangs the turkey.
Here's a turkey.
Oh my god, it's huge.
Tony tells Carm that she needs to tell Rosalie and her family not to come to Thanksgiving, saying he'll do it himself as Carm expresses her disappointment. Tony walks into therapy, where he runs into Gloria Trillo, the final boss of batshit insane female side characters in The Sopranos. She might seem normal now, but oh no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Gloria is revealed to be a saleswoman for a Mercedes-Benz dealership as Tony listens to her talk with one of her customers on the phone. And the two talk with each other, with Tony claiming that he's only here to quit smoking, as Gloria jokingly says that she's a serial killer since she's murdered 7 relationships, which is what most cultures would consider a green flag. They realize that Melfi accidentally double-booked them as Tony offers to give his appointment to her. And while Gloria politely rejects the offer, Melfi walks through the door as Tony tells Gloria it's alright. And the two share a suspicious glance with each other before Melfi shuts the door. Carm lies to Rosalie and tells her that she needs to cancel Thanksgiving dinner due to her father receiving some troubling news from the doctor about his white blood cells. And Rosalie wishes the best for them as Carm hangs up the phone and prays that she doesn't go to hell for this. Rosalie tells Ralphie the bad news as Ralphie silently speculates that there's more to this than just an illness, as Tony tells Melfi about the situation with Ralphie in more vague terms. And when Melfi asks if it's complicated by a personal relationship, Tony changes the subject and asks Melfi about Gloria and what she's like. And Melfi says that she can't talk about another patient with others. The meeting ends as Tony notes that it's dark out and asks Melfi if she wants him to walk out to her car with him. And offer that Melfi declines as she says she has extra work to do. The family gets together for Thanksgiving as Janice brags about the time that she served Barry Sanders at a restaurant once, with Carm's dad asking if she meant Colonel Sanders. Meadow depressingly unfoils fruitcake as Tony looks at her. And the show cuts to Tracy for a moment, implying that Tony's care for Tracy is strongly linked with his care for Meadow, as both characters are young women who Tony feels need proper love and guidance in their lives, which is likely the main reason why Tony beat the shit out of Ralphie for what he did to Tracy. In that moment, when he saw Tracy lying on the ground, he envisioned Meadow in her place instead. Tony walks up to Meadow and tells her how much he loves her despite the rough patch they've gone through recently. A slightly dark yet very sweet moment that's quickly interrupted by Carm yelling,
Everybody, come on, dinner!
Ralphie has a depressing Thanksgiving dinner with Rosalie, her mom, and Jackie. And Jackie leaves dinner early as Ralphie tells him to suck his dick. Meanwhile, Tony throws a piece of food at Janice's prayer group friend, who fell asleep at the table. Jackie makes a surprise visit to dinner as Meadow shoots a very pleased look at him. And Jackie asks if Meadow wants to go see a movie or something. And Janice is like, wow, a soprano winning the Preel, that's never happened before.
Oh, Richie, baby, you're the best.
Ew, gross! Meadow and Jackie later kiss in the car, and Jackie offers to hang out with her this weekend, which Meadow denies since she has to study. Jackie reveals that he doesn't have to do that since he doesn't even go to Rutgers anymore, talks about how horny he is and is like, please come with me, please! But Meadow says she's still going to Hunter's as Jackie gets really pissed off. And Jackie fools around angrily at the prospect of not getting his weenie wet. Carm talks about Rosalie and Ralphie's relationship as Tony gets caught up watching a Mercedes-Benz commercial, saying that he's thinking of getting one. I wonder why. Paulie and some guys gossip about Tony uninviting Ralphie from Thanksgiving dinner. And Tony and Gigi kick them out so they can have a talk, with Gigi telling Tony that Ralphie hasn't said much about Tony. And Gigi talks about his current life struggles before Tony tells Gigi he's doing a good job. And Gigi leaves as Silvio enters, with Silvio noting that the stress of the job seems to be eating away at Gigi. Meanwhile, Ralphie rants at Johnny Sack about his current struggles with Tony, and how Tony's treating him badly for absolutely no reason at all, despite Ralphie being one of his best earners. Ralphie debates murdering Tony as Johnny tells him to cool it. And Ralphie asks Johnny if he can switch over to the Lupertazzi family. But Johnny tells him nuh-uh, and that he doesn't want Ralphie fucking up the relationship between the Sopranos and New York. And also points out that Ralphie brought this onto himself by killing Tracy. And Ralphie defends himself once again from that hooah.
A, she was a hooah. B, she hit me.
Ralphie claims that this all happened because he was high on cocaine that night, saying that he's done with it as Johnny tells him to shut up and apologize to Tony. But Ralphie goes, wah, he hit me, and Johnny says, fuck it, I'll talk to him. Johnny talks to Tony and claims that Ralphie's giving an apology, and pitches the idea of making Ralphie a captain and putting him in charge of a construction operation that can make them millions of dollars. But Tony remains firm and tells Johnny that that ain't happening. Johnny later tells Ralphie that things went just great with Tony and that he's open to working something out. And Jackie Jr. says he's moving to a friend's place as Ralphie tries offering him some extra ecstasy to sell like all loving fathers should. And claims that Tony knew that Ralphie wasn't coming over for dinner and had Carm lie to Rosalie to save face, which is definitely what happened. Melfi complains to Elliot about how exhausting dealing with her patients is. And while Melfi apologizes for her behavior, Elliot tells her that there's no need, saying that she's dealt with a lot these past few months. And Melfi mentions that she almost cried when Tony offered to walk her to her car earlier. Later, Ralphie greets Paulie and Chris as he meets with Tony of Vesuvio, and attempts to apologize to Tony, using the coke line once again to excuse his behavior. Tony treats Ralphie like a child at the principal's office as Ralphie adds more details to his apology while Tony eats in front of him. And he awkwardly walks away as Tony continues eating while not saying shit. Gigi meets with some guys to play cards and eat leftover turkey sandwiches. And Gigi notes how bad turkey is for his tum-tum as Ralphie meets at Johnny's place to complain about the fact that Tony didn't say anything to him. He decides to go full throttle and proclaims to Johnny that this means war. But Johnny tells him to calm his tits as Gigi has a rough time going poopy in the bathroom. Junior watches more Beat Rice videos on the TV as Tony walks in. And Junior mentions the issue with Ralphie as well as the fact that Gigi shouldn't have been named captain, which Tony disagrees with, calling him a good and well-respected earner. Junior argues against this and kicks off a discussion over being the boss and how your decisions reflect on your character. And Vito pounds on the door awaiting a response from Gigi, which doesn't come. When they break down the door, it's revealed that Gigi pulled an Elvis and died on the toilet, and they call 911. Tony attends Gigi's funeral, where he pays his respects to Gigi while Gigi breathes in his fucking coffin. And Tony sits next to Paulie and Silvio, where they talk about Gigi dying from heart disease as well as how embarrassing it is to die in the toilet.
Hey, there are worse ways to go.
Even still, I'm the bishop, dude. Pretty fucking humiliating.
Hey guys, keep your voice down. Gigi can hear you, he's still breathing. Paulie asks Tony who's next in line for position as Capo. And we get this long panning shot on all of the potential picks until it ends on Ralphie, which makes Tony realize that his hands might be tied. Tony later talks with Artie at Vesuvio about Gigi's loss before Ralphie walks inside, and Tony promotes Ralphie as captain, which makes Ralphie happy as he thanks Tony. However, Ralphie isn't satisfied with just getting the role and asks Tony to tell him that it was earned and not just because Gigi got constipated and died. Tony tells him to shut his mouth and just take the position. And Ralphie accepts it, saying he's been waiting forever for this moment. And Tony semi-jokingly says to be careful what you wish for as he walks out of Vesuvio with no fanfare for Ralphie's promotion. Jackie plays pool with a friend as they talk about Jackie taking out Meadow. And Jackie speculates whether or not it's a good idea to date Meadow, considering she's Tony Soprano's daughter. As Meadow cucks Jackie and steals his keys so she can go see a band. She takes from her father and starts fooling around in Jackie's car, which goes well.
Just fooling around.
Jackie gets Meadow out of the car. She starts drunkenly crying and apologizing to Jackie for crashing his car. And while Jackie says it's okay and that'll take her home, Meadow says she wants to go home with him, which makes Jackie internally go, "Hooray!" as the two hug. The next day, Tony takes a visit to the Mercedes-Benz dealership, where he finds Gloria talking with some customers. Gloria smiles at Tony and walks up to him as Tony says he's looking for a new car, and asks if he can go on a test drive with a certain sales rep, which Gloria agrees to. Melfi later gets a call from Gloria, who tells her that she needs to cancel her appointment, as Tony hops into the bed next to her. Melfi hangs up the phone confused as Gloria and Tony make out on the bed of the Stugotz, ending the episode. Another great episode. As I mentioned before, Gloria is going to become a very entertaining character to watch later on in the season, even though she seems relatively unassuming in this episode. I really enjoyed watching stupid Jackie trying to get laid every 5 seconds with Meadow, and the whole conflict with Ralphie was also really fun to watch. The audacity of Ralphie is absolutely insane, but what I find especially interesting about the whole situation is just how little everyone seems to care about the murder of Tracy besides Tony. It makes sense, they're mob guys, they kill people for money, but the way they treat it like someone simply got robbed or whatever is really fascinating to watch. Like I mentioned before, if it was anybody other than Tracy, then Tony also probably wouldn't have given a shit. But the fact that Tracy was so nice and also just so happened to correlate with Meadow in his mind causes him to be much more empathetic, which is something that I find really interesting. A lot of great moments stem from this episode, like Tony pulling a Steph Curry on the prayer group guy's face, Gigi shitting himself to death, Meadow fooling around, as well as the beginning of Ralphie's emphatic use of the term hooah.
She was a hooah.
Like I said, the whole conflict with Ralphie this episode was very entertaining to watch, even if it felt like we kept hearing characters be like, "Ooh, did you hear about Tony and Ralphie?" every 5 minutes. Personally, I think Ralphie needs to be taught a lesson for murdering a young girl like that, as well as disrespecting my establishment.
Wah, he hit me.
Overall, I'm giving this episode a light S tier. Wow, this tier is getting stuffed. Hey, don't blame me, I told you this show was good. Season 3, Episode 9, The Telltale Moozadell. Tony surprises Carm on her birthday with a brand new diamond ring, and they start making out as AJ walks in and kills Tony's boner. AJ gives his present to Carm, a DVD copy of The Matrix, which is slightly less better than a $4,000 diamond ring. And Meadow walks in to give Carm her gift, a certificate for a free spa day. Later that night, we watch this club owner cry over losing his club after gambling in on a Vikings game. And Furio splashes water in his face and tells him to quit his bitching as we cut to the family singing happy birthday to Carm, which is immediately interrupted by the perpetually horny Jackie Jr. They go back to singing happy birthday with the most wonderful and on-key rendition of the song ever.
Happy birthday to you. Yeah!
Oh my god, not in front of the kids! Jackie and AJ talk about AJ's generational football career, and he leaves to go meet friends as we cut to the Lollipop Club, the place the club owner lost. As Chris walks Adriana into it as she wears a blindfold. Chris takes off the blindfold and reveals to Adriana that this is her club now, with Chris and Furio as silent partners, and Adriana is ecstatic as Tony watches TV while eating leftover cake. Carm asks Tony about his Mercedes obsession from earlier, but Tony claims that he looked like a douchebag driving one as Rosalie calls the place, with Tony telling her that Jackie and Meadow are out watching a movie. Carm says she's not thrilled about Jackie and Meadow getting together since it's separating her from time with the family, along with the fact that she never envisioned her dating a mob-related guy as Carm sits in bed next to a mob-related guy. Meadow gives Jackie some paper she wrote for him, and they play Battleship as we cut to AJ and his friends swimming in the pool and smoking cigarettes, revealing that they broke into the school and are causing mayhem. The mayhem only increases after one of the guys breaks into the principal's office and throws his desk into the pool, prompting the rest of the kids to start throwing everything into the pool, including the trophies after one of them smashes the display case with a chair. Meadow wakes up in another suspiciously happy mood as Jackie plays football with AJ, and Meadow asks Tony for a car so she can fuck Jackie more, visit the family and drive around more easily. And while Tony brings up the fact that he got her a car last season, Meadow points out that it was Eric's Jeep and gives us an update on our favorite talented gambler Davey Scatino, mentioning that he's now cooped up in a mental facility in Nevada. Carm tells Meadow that she wants her to take advantage of all of the great stuff offered to her by the city as Meadow stares at Jackie out the window, who gives AJ advice on how to become the next Tom Brady, minus the whole kissing your children on the lips thing. Principal Buster from Arrested Development looks around at the mess AJ and his friends made as one of the janitors finds a pizza box with some slices left over, and the police trace the pizza box to its original source, where the cops have an absolutely beautiful exchange with the store's owner.
Some kids broke into Verdun Day High School, broke things. They left us there.
Now you tell me their names, I go put them my foot up in their ass.
The owner's son notes that this pizza is a custom job, and while he doesn't want to give up who ordered it, one of the cops tells him that he's technically an accessory after the fact, and the son gives up the name as the show cuts to AJ getting grilled by his parents. Carm asks AJ what the fuck his problem is, as AJ says he doesn't know and that it all just kinda happened. And Carm uses the old "if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you" adage, which, unrelated side note, is such a stupid phrase. It's comparing apples to oranges, of course you're not going to kill yourself. Tony walks into the conversation and asks how the fuck you vandalize a swimming pool and slaps AJ in the face. AJ says the principal's gonna call them as Tony yells at AJ that his football career is boned, on his mother's birthday no less.
On your mother's birthday?
It wasn't. It was...
And Carm meets at Vesuvio with Rosalie, who celebrates the blossoming relationship between Meadow and Jackie, as well as Ralphie being pleased about the new promotion. They discuss Artie and Charmaine's upcoming divorce as we cut to Tony meeting Gloria at the dealership once again. And he flirts with Gloria big time as she pitches the idea of going to the zoo with Tony. And she walks back into the dealership as Tony sits around with Paulie at the pork store, who tells Tony that you can't trust snakes since they can literally fuck themselves. Jackie walks through the door and greets Tony, who talks with Jackie about his newfound relationship with Meadow and how Tony is going to be very protective over her. He warns Jackie to keep up his good behavior as he slips him some bills to go get some dessert for Meadow, as Adriana announces the grand reopening of the Lollipop Club, now renamed to the Crazy Horse. The band starts playing as everyone in the club hangs around the place, including some familiar faces like Paulie, who slips Chris some cash from Silvio and Tony as a congratulations, as the band keeps playing extremely loudly in the background. This guy named Matush gets caught dealing ecstasy and is thrown out of the club by Furio and some other guys, and the next day, Gloria and Tony go on a romantic date at the zoo as Tony bites Gloria's ear like she's Evander Holyfield. Tony and Gloria walk around the place and talk about Buddhism and stuff while getting all flirty and touchy with each other, and it all culminates in them finding a secluded area in the zoo and playing Battleship in front of the snake exhibit, arguably the peak of the snake's existence. Carlo and Matush complain to Jackie Jr. that he can't sell ecstasy at the club anymore due to new management. And we cut to Principal Buster telling Tony and Carm that the school's zero tolerance policy would normally result in AJ's expulsion, but in this case, they've decided to downgrade it to a suspension instead, since AJ's doing okay in school and is participating in sports. Tony and Carm ask if there's any other way the school can punish AJ so they don't have to do anything themselves, but the principal notes that further punishments must be done parentally, which pisses Tony and Carm off. The principal notes that any other infraction will cause an immediate expulsion for AJ, and Carm claims while walking out with Tony that they aren't kicking AJ off the football team so they can win the big game, as Tony says that AJ's punishments don't end here. Gloria talks with Melfi in therapy and tells her that everything in life is going very well. And Melfi brings up a voice that she overheard when Gloria called in last week to cancel. And Gloria lies by saying her car broke down and that it must have been the mechanic, a lie which Melfi very subtly sees through. Gloria gets really defensive and is like, dude, what the fuck, why are you spying on me? But Melfi says she's simply caring for Gloria's well-being. And Gloria continues being weird about it as Melfi says she'll drop the subject. Silvio and Chris talk about the complexities of owning a club as Jackie walks in to talk to Chris about the ecstasy thing. And Jackie talks to him like they're best buds and chill as Chris tells him to fuck off and that he doesn't want X in his club. And Jackie leaves through the fire exit and activates the alarms. Jackie fools around over to Matush and acts like Chris and him struck up a deal, saying that Matush can only sell the ecstasy outside, not in the club, and demands a disappointed Matush for a cut of the profits before Matush leaves the car. Tony and Carm tell AJ that he's grounded for a month and that he's going to be doing chores around the house in the meantime. And Matush sells X outside of the Crazy Horse and gets the piss beaten out of him once again. Jackie meets Matush in the hospital and goes, haha, whoopsie daisies. And Matush says that he doesn't think the guys like Jackie, which pisses Jackie off. Later, Jackie cooks with Rosalie and Ralphie. And Jackie asks Ralphie for a piece so he can command respect like that's gonna work. And Ralphie sets him up with a 38 as Tony hangs out at Gloria's place and dances with her to her stereo system. Gloria claims to Tony that she doesn't expect anything out of Tony but kindness, and calls Tony self-centered and vain. And Tony asks what the fuck do you mean by that before Gloria quickly changes the subject by stripping in front of Tony. She grabs Tony's piece by his ankle, with Tony claiming that some of his clients live in bad neighborhoods. But Gloria sees right through this lie and tells Tony that he doesn't need to lie to her about what he's really like. Later, Tony talks to Melfi about the issue with AJ, and how other than that, things are going well in life, including his marriage, mentioning that therapy might have helped Carm with their attitude. He mentions that he went to the zoo recently and had a good time there as well, and claims that he feels that therapy is also helping with this happiness. He references a Buddhist quote that Gloria gave to him, which Melfi immediately pinpoints as such. And Tony's like, I've been reading The Art of War, that's why. Which leaves Melfi suspicious as she ends the meeting. Tony gives Melfi some extra cash and whistles out the door as Bill Hader's son calls Melfi. And Melfi immediately dials up hater mode to an 11 as she complains about her patients lying to her and being pieces of shit. And she calms down and asks how Bill Hader's son is doing, who asks if he can get some expensive books. And Melfi looks at the extra money Tony gave to her and goes, well, Tony gambles with a crew later that night, and notices Jackie Jr. sitting at the blackjack table, which pisses Tony off tremendously. He gets dragged over by Tony as Tony asks why the fuck he's here. And while Jackie makes up an excuse that he was dragged to the place, Tony tells him that he warned Jackie about this and tells him to leave, smarten up, and never come back. Before we go to the next scene, I want to dissect Jackie's hand in blackjack for a second. So in this scene, Tony tells Jackie to hit when Jackie has a 13 and the dealer is showing a 5. Now any normal player in this scenario would stand since the dealer is likely to bust. But Tony fucks with Jackie a bit and tells him to hit, causing Jackie to bust this hand. And when Tony tells him that it was Jackie's hand and that he shouldn't have listened, Jackie tells Tony that he was going to hit anyway. This is a great and subtle detail that shows us just how much of a fucking idiot Jackie is. The next morning, Tony viciously attacks Carm's neck as he notices some new earrings she bought. And she mentions that Jackie Jr. is taking Meadow to see a play. She says that Jackie Jr. is acting a lot better than she expected as loud thud noises can be heard on the roof. And it's revealed to be AJ cleaning out the gutters, ending the episode. By Jove, I can't believe it, it's another great episode. Season 3 just cannot quit with the amount of either amazing or solid episodes so far. I believe I mentioned this in a previous video, but I love the plot lines in the show when AJ gets into some sort of trouble. And this one in particular was very entertaining to watch, causing this poor pizza owner to gain inordinate and eternal suffering. His pizza never hurt nobody. By the way, fun fact, guess who was an actress that was throwing shit with AJ in the pool? That's right, Lady fucking Gaga, and I'm not kidding. I can't believe I didn't notice her. Her poker face must have been really good. Oh, really? That's the one you applaud for. Watching Gloria and Tony's relationship develop was also fun to watch. It can only mean good things for Tony's future. And we also get the privilege of watching Jackie Jr. make more of an ass out of himself trying to enter the game. Another very entertaining element of this episode. My favorite part about Jackie Jr. is that there are all these little things that peel back his character just a bit that give you more of an idea of what he's really like. Like the moment where he exited the Bing through the fire exit, or thinking that nothing will go wrong, lying to Matush telling him he can sell X, or hitting on a fucking bus card. Of course, this is The Sopranos we're talking about, so these little moments of poor judgment aren't exactly going to be staying little for long. The Sopranos does an amazing job rewarding viewers who pay attention to the small, minute details. Sun Tzu's The Art of War is a book that was recommended to Tony all the way back in Season 2, Episode 5, and just last episode, Tony mentioned reading it and thinking it was good, going as far as to quote the book to Johnny when talking about Ralphie.
If your opponent is of choleric temper, irritate him.
And then earlier this episode, Tony tried to use the book as a way to wiggle himself out of the lie that he's definitely not playing Battleship with Gloria. It's all these small things that makes The Sopranos infinitely rewatchable, because every time there's always going to be a little line or a little detail that you weren't able to pick up on a first viewing. Oh, and there's also like great characters and writing and plotlines, I guess. This episode is getting another S tier. I still can't believe Lady Gaga's in this episode. I didn't even notice her the first time. She must have magically appeared into the show on rewatch and went abracadabra. Season 3, Episode 10. to save us all from Satan's power. The episode begins on the same boardwalk Tony had his batshit crazy fever dreams on, as he stares out onto the waves, similar to the season 2 finale. This isn't just any old dream, however. It's a flashback! We can tell this is the case because A, the O.J. Simpson case is still a hot topic, B, Jackie Aprile Sr. is still alive, and Puss C hasn't been outed as a rat yet. Oh, and also Tony's rocking a really shitty hairdo. This happens a lot in flashbacks. Pussy sits down with the guys and complains about his stupid back for the 14th time this series. And they go outside to talk business, where Tony warns Pussy to be careful pushing heroin, a very prophetic warning. Pussy says he's always wanted a house by the ocean, another very prophetic sentence considering where Pussy lives now. And we cut back to present day as Paulie walks up to Tony asking what the fuck he's doing, with Tony admitting that he's got pussy on the brain once again. And Paulie complains about the fact that he can't collect his dues on the Esplanade construction job due to Ralphie starting a strike. And Tony says he'll see what he can do. Tony goes caw-shoo on the bed as he looks at a list of Christmas gifts he's gotta get and starts hyperventilating. And Carr makes this worse by telling Tony he's gotta help Janice with a bunch of dumb shit and walks out of the room. He complains to Melfi about how his mood has suddenly dipped from good to shitty, mentioning his mild panic attack from earlier that morning, and mentions he's not taking his meds regularly and that the only thing he's written in his log for Melfi is a Christmas list. When Melfi asks what preceded this attack, Tony says he went down to the shore and was thinking about a friend that worked for the federal government, with Tony jokingly asking if he's ruining her Christmas, as Melfi thinks about how that friend is definitely not alive anymore.
By the Lord.
E major.
E major. Prayer group guy and Janice try making a great mother jumpin' song together as Carm and Tony walk into the house with groceries. And prayer group guy falls asleep as Tony says he's not cooking any Christmas dinner till the place is cleaned up. And Janice claims she can't because her wrist has nerve damage, allegedly. She mentions that she got it from the night she got her shit rocked by the Russians.
Motherfucker!
And she also mentions that she's not really going to prayer meetings anymore and is instead working on contributing to the market of Christian contemporary music. And her wrist starts hurting again as Tony writes down Janice's Russian in his list. Silvio and Chris start setting up Christmas stuff in the pork store as Silvio pulls out an old Santa outfit at the bottom of the box, with the guys mentioning that this is going to be the first Christmas where Pussy isn't going to be Santa. I wonder why. They mentioned how he wasn't acting like himself Christmas of 1995 after a visit to Boca, as Ray, the current FBI informant, says selling your friends out is despicable. And they all look at Tony as the next man in line to play Santa, which Tony bluntly refuses. Tony Mater... I'm Toe Mater without the tuh. Tony later meets with Slava, the boss of the Russian mob, to launder his money through offshore accounts. And Tony asks Slava if he can help track down the guy who beat the shit out of Janice, which Slava agrees to help him with. Tony crosses 2 items off his checklist as we cut to the stripper pulling a Mario and sliding down the pole. And Silvio complains about a large chunk of cheese being missing from the Bing for some reason. I guess this makes sense, he does stick motherfucking provolone in his socks at night. He goes to the back of the building, and when he looks behind the costumes, he finds... Get it? He's a rat. It turns out Silvio was dreaming as the show cuts to Silvio immediately heading over to Tony's house to talk about it. I know I praise the dream sequences in the show constantly, but I love how the show captures that feeling of waking up from a strange dream. The characters don't slowly wake up from what just happened, they jolt awake immediately. And it's not only accurate to real life, but the impact that the characters feel can also be felt by the audience through the editing and the acting. Silvio tells Tony about the signs of Pussy's ratting that they should have picked up on, like his visit to Boca. And while Tony says that Pussy was only there for 24 hours to set up a sit-down with Junior and that he knows he was there the whole time, Silvio speculates that him flipping had to do with the sit-down as the show cuts to the past, where it's revealed that Pussy never even showed up to the sit-down in the first place. Oh, come on! Once again, this was not my editing, this was the show's. What is this, a sitcom?
I didn't eat, I didn't sleep.
You get laid?
Yeah.
Okay, anyways, Pussy finally shows up and claims to the guys that his Gumar's mother was in the hospital due to a stroke. And we cut to the present, where Silvio says that they should have realized right then and there that Pussy was a rat, a sentiment that Tony agrees with. Later, Paulie, Silvio, and Tony eat at Vesuvio and discuss gifts they're getting their Gumars for the holidays. And they notice Charmaine is wearing a lot more revealing clothing, which Paulie notes with this amazing one-liner.
It's the miracle of Christmas.
Next, the blind will see and the lame will walk.
She walks over to Tony and jokes that two guys sitting close to their table are working with the FBI, which is not exactly great timing given the main subject matter of this episode. And Artie calls Charmaine a hypocrite for shit-talking Tony behind his back and acting all smiley and lovey-dovey to his face. To which Charmaine says that the current quality of Artie's food's not going to be the thing bringing customers back, as Artie storms off to deliver the grub. Tony gets a call from Slava and gets the name and address of a guy named Igor Parnasky, the guy who beat Janice up, and Furio and Tony later get a ride to the airport from that Igor in Santa hats, laughing all the way, ha ha ha. Later, Carm and Tony talk about Artie's future divorce as well as the stress of the holiday season, and Tony turns on the TV and gets pissed off at the ending of It's a Wonderful Life, which I didn't even know was possible. As the show cuts to the next day, where Chris notes that they still don't have a Santa yet. The guys talk about Santa and elves and Jim Carrey's Grinch for some reason as Bobby comes in to deliver some toys, which makes the guys realize that they found their Santa. We cut to Janice cooking dinner as a news report claims that a guy named Igor got the piss beaten out of him and trapped under Santa's sleigh in a window display. And Janice starts crying as she claims to prayer group guy that she's found a great idea for a new song. Meadow comes home to Carm sitting in the living room admiring the tree, and Carm mentions that Meadow and Jackie are getting pretty close, which Meadow doesn't respond to. Meanwhile, Tony flexes a gift he's giving to Carm to Chris and Silvio and goes over to talk with Charmaine, who's a lot less friendly to Tony than she was earlier, claiming all of Artie's problems stemmed from Tony and his guys as Tony angrily storms out and forces Chris and Silvio to leave with him. They head to the Bing to get some shots as Silvio notices that Jackie fucking Jr. is getting a lap dance from one of the strippers, and Tony calmly walks over and forces Jackie to walk with him. He calmly walks Jackie to the bathroom and calmly starts beating the shit out of him.
Put your hands up. Put your hands up! Come on, put your hands up. No, come on, you fuck!
He tells Jackie about all the time he spent telling Jackie Sr. he raised a good kid and finds the piece Ralphie gave to him in his jacket and says, "Wow, this is really cool, where'd you get it from?" Tony tells Jackie that this is a new low for him as he takes his 38 and walks out of the bathroom. Tony's not kidding when he says this either. This is easily one of Jackie's stupidest moves in the show. Not only did he cheat on the daughter of a top-level mafia boss, not only did he do it in the place that said top-level mafia boss works and frequents at, but he also had the gall to say, "It's not what you think," when confronted by Tony. What else could it possibly imply? Now, obviously, Tony's a hypocrite for being this angry considering all of the cheating he does in the show, but that doesn't change the fact that Jackie is an idiot who hits on bus cards and fucks strippers while dating mafia boss children. Carm gets pissed at Tony for being out all night, and accuses Tony of cheating on her with Charmaine, bringing up a detail from all the way back to season 1 when Charmaine said that she went out and played Battleship with Tony back in high school, along with the fact that Tony said she looked good after being dumped by Artie. Later, Tony goes into therapy and talks about Jackie being a two-faced idiot, asking what he's gonna do with him now, and Melfi brings up the friend who was working for the federal government, and Tony quickly storms out of the conversation. A huge line is formed around the pork store for the big Soprano crew Christmas tradition as Bobby gets dressed up as Santa. As he puts on the outfit, however, Tony realizes that Pussy was wearing a wire underneath the Santa outfit back in 1995, noting he was already wearing the outfit when he walked into the building as we cut to the past, where Pussy gets pissed at Paulie for touching the outfit. He sits next to Tony and wastes absolutely no time talking to him about business.
Just want to double check that the way he's paid for us to go down there. We reached out to the EPA guy like we told Barone.
That reminds me, Tony. Dick called this morning.
I'm fucking talking to you. Stop fucking interrupting.
Oh! What the fuck is wrong with you?
Fuck you.
We see a very young and slightly less stupid Jackie Jr. walk in with his father as Pussy gets prepared to Santa it up. And the show fades into the present day, where Bobby has a slight bit of trouble getting into character as Chris Kringle.
You were just here.
I was not.
Yeah, you were. You were on my lap 5 minutes ago.
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you were. Now you're going on Santa's list and you're getting nothing.
Fuck you, Santa!
Hey!
The little kid apologizes to Santa as Tony tells him to calm his tits and lighten up. And Tony later talks with Silvio and Paulie, with the two noting that Bobby made for a really fucking bad Santa Claus. They reflect on Pussy and their lives and how he differed from all the other murders they did, saying that they cared about him like a brother, and that, despite him being a rat, he made a really good Santa. We cut to Christmas Day, where everyone opens presents as Jackie Jr. decides that this is a great time to join the Sopranos Christmas, and he gives some presents for the family as well as one for Meadow, as Tony watches him in disgust. Jackie anxiously meets with Tony in the kitchen, and decides that this is a great time to admit to Tony that he flunked out of Rutgers, saying he got distracted by things and was convinced by Ralphie that he should drop out and that he was given the piece by Ralphie to protect his car from being broken into, which Tony doesn't believe for a moment. He tells Jackie that he hasn't decided what to do with him and demands him to go back to the living room. And AJ rides on a scooter he got from Tony around the house as Jackie leaves the house early. and Tony gives Carm his present to her and makes out with her for 3 hours as Meadow gives her gift to Tony, a talking billy mouth bass like the one he threw out just a few episodes ago, likely representing the fact that Tony will never be able to truly forget about pussy. A great full circle moment that nearly causes Tony to shit himself as he feigns happiness. And we get another shot of the ocean, replicating the ending to the season 2 finale as the show fades to black, ending the episode. This was a very good episode. I thought it was kind of odd that the show retreaded material about the death of a guy from last season that doesn't really make a huge impact on this season's storyline, but I guess it makes sense considering all of the small moments of pussy crossing Tony's mind this season. The episode does a good job on the material anyway, so I'm not about to complain about it. What I will complain about, however, is the confusing continuity with the pussy stuff and the overall timeline of The Sopranos. Alright, now bear with me for a second. At the beginning of the season 1 video, I stated that every season of the show takes place in the year that it was created. Season 1 of the show was created in 1999, therefore it takes place in 1999. However, upon further investigation, this is actually not the case. Each season of the show actually takes place a year before each season was created, and I now know this for 2 reasons. Firstly, at the beginning of the pilot episode, the newspaper that Tony picks up quite literally lists the year as 1998, not 1999. That was a mistake on my part. I honestly have no idea how I didn't notice this. Secondly, in the second episode of season 2, Skip states to Pussy that he's been in their tit since 1998, which makes sense considering that Pussy got arrested by the cops and nobody knows anything near the end of season 1, which would, in turn, make Pussy's arrest take place in 1998. However, what this episode implies is that Pussy wasn't working with the government since 1998, but since 1995, with Tony and the rest of the guys tracing back to moments that they believe should have stood out to them as clear indicators that Pussy flipped to the government. But this doesn't make any sense. If Pussy was working for the government since 1995, you'd think that he would have obtained more than enough information to indict Tony. So either A, Tony and the guys were wrong and are just overthinking, B, David Chase made a whoopsie poopsie and forgot that the show mentioned Pussy had only been working for the government since 1998, or C, I'm the stupid one here and this actually makes total sense. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I'm genuinely curious to hear another side of this. Anyways, other than that, this episode was pretty great. There were a lot of really funny moments, like Pussy getting pissed off and acting really suspicious, along with that one kid saying fuck you to Santa Claus. He should have won an Emmy for this. The flashbacks were also really interesting, and I thought it was clever the way they used the OJ case to demonstrate a scene taking place in the past. Watching Jackie Aprile Sr. walk and talk without being bedridden was also nice to see. And everything in general with Pussy was also very entertaining to watch, even if it has questionable implications for the timeline. Also, watching Jackie Jr. getting his ass beaten was awesome. I'm giving this one a high A tier. Fuck you, OJ. E major. E major. And now the moment you've been waiting for. I'm not doing the whole thing. Season 3, Episode 11. Pine Barrens. The episode opens up with Gloria pulling up to the Stugatz and walking inside, and Irina calls the boat pretending to be AJ's principal, and she immediately switches over to "Hi, Tony" mode when Tony's given the phone as he quickly hangs up. Tony pretends like it was the school principal, but Gloria sees through this lie, and Tony fesses that it was an old girlfriend as Gloria starts criticizing him, and she immediately jumps to the conclusion that Tony doesn't want to deal with her and actually hates her and wants her to burn in hell as she throws her Christmas gift from him out the window. Paulie gets his nails done as he gets a call from Tony, and he tells Paulie to go down tomorrow to the apartment of a guy named Valerie, a guy who works for Slava who we briefly saw last episode, and make him cough up $5 grand that he owes to Silvio, since Silvio can't do it due to him coughing up a lung with the flu. We cut to another Tony Carm meeting with Melfi, as they talk about their worries with Meadow dating Jackie and briefly spat about how it's technically Tony's fault since he was so mean to Noah. Melfi notes how they were able to talk through this without getting pissed off at each other, and they note that they haven't been arguing as much lately due to the therapy. As we cut to Meadow and Jackie playing Scrabble as stupid Jackie thinks the word oblique is pronounced oblique. Jackie attempts to flirt through Scrabble by spelling out the word ass and is like, give me some. Jackie leaves upon the realization that he's not getting laid as we cut to Chris and Paulie heading to Valerie's house while talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The Russians? They're not all bad.
How about the Cuban Missile Crisis? Cocksuckers moved nuclear warheads into Cuba, pointed them right at us.
That was real? I saw that movie. I thought it was bullshit.
It is going to take a lot of restraint on my end to not show every funny moment from this episode. Chris grabs Valerie's money while Paulie makes non-stop jokes at Valerie and his Russian heritage as he grabs the universal remote from the entertainment center. And when Valerie asks Paulie to put it back on the docking station, Paulie goes whoopsie-daisy and drops it on the floor. This action dials the situation to an 11 as Valerie decides that it's fighting time. And a 2v1 begins with Chris and Paulie attempting to attack Valerie in one of the funniest fight scenes in the entire show, with Chris briefly riding him like a merry-go-round before him and Paulie eventually wrestle him to the ground and choke him to death.
What the fuck?
Paulie says he didn't have a choice, as if he didn't literally instigate the entire conflict as he grabs a rug off the wall. And he and Chris drag Valerie's wrapped up body into the car as the show cuts to Gloria and Tony in bed, with Gloria saying that she had no right to answer Tony's phone in the first place as Tony opens up his gift from her, a weird Ebenezer Scrooge looking robe. And they play Battleship as Paulie interrupts their session by calling Tony, saying they had a problem with Valerie and that he was the one who instigated the conflict by sucker punching Paulie. Paulie admits that Valerie's currently lying in the trunk of their car right now as Tony angrily asks what the fuck he's supposed to say to Slava later. And he tells Paulie to do whatever he wants with Valerie, but to make sure to keep the situation far away from Tony. Gloria plans dinner at her house with Tony as Paulie plans the dumping of Valerie's body out loud in public. And Paulie makes the crucial mistake of not stopping for food beforehand. Paulie plans to bury him all the way down at Pine Barrens and says that they can freshen up and get some food afterwards, which makes Chris frustrated like a kid that found out he's got to go to the dentist after school and not someone about to bury a body. Tony meets Melfi again and tells her that therapy's helping with his relationship with Carm again, and decides this to be a great time to admit that he's seen Gloria, saying that she reminds him a lot of Melfi and that she makes him happy. Melfi asks if cheating on your spouse is really a good way to deal with stress, but Tony's like, doesn't matter to me, I'm happy, and makes the insane proclamation that being with Gloria makes him happier than his medication and the therapy combined, which future Tony will certainly agree with. Chris and Paulie finally arrive at Pine Barrens to bury the body, with Chris complaining that he's still hungry. And it's revealed that, whoops, Valerie's still alive. Paulie continues taunting Valerie as Valerie absolutely refuses to back down, even when getting the piss knocked out of him. The guys make their way deep into the woods, forcing Valerie to walk at gunpoint. And Paulie makes the grave error of forcing Valerie to dig his own grave instead of just shooting him and getting it over with. Paulie tells Valerie that they didn't intend on killing him, saying that Valerie's big mouth was what landed him in trouble and that he needs to learn to shut up, which is absolutely glorious coming from Paulie.
How far is it to Atlantic City?
Valerie escapes their grasp and starts running through the woods while Chris and Paulie shoot at him, with Chris struggling after that blow he took to the face. Eventually, after all of this running, Paulie manages to get a clean shot right on Valerie.
What the fuck?
They continue chasing after Valerie on the off chance he was somehow able to survive that, and they spot a blood trail that ends up nowhere, prompting them to keep searching through the woods. Tony calls Paulie and Chris to see how progress is going, and Paulie gives them the unfortunate news that they've run into yet another problem, saying that their package is somehow run off despite earlier implying that it was dead. And Tony yells, asking if there's any way the package could survive, as AJ looks over at him like he's insane. He yells at Paulie once again about how he has a meeting with Slava later and hangs up. And the two decide to cut their losses and walk back to their car, assuming that Valerie didn't survive the shot he took to the head. However, as the two walk through the woods, Chris realizes that they've been walking in a circle, and Chris says that they're lost as Paulie insists that they aren't and to stop getting cunty. Tony meets with Slava to give him his money to place in the offshore accounts, and Slava grabs a drink for them as Tony's like, say, what's up with Valerie? And Slava says he doesn't know, but that he told him to give Silvio the money. Tony points out a picture with Slava and Valerie as Slava recounts how Valerie was like a brother to him, but that many poor decisions in his life have turned him into a shadow of his former self. He continues thinking fondly over Valerie and gets emotional as Tony keeps thinking about how that fucker is dead. And the show cuts back to Paulie and Chris, still wandering around through the woods. Tony calls Paulie and informs him that Valerie was an ex-commando that killed 16 Chechen rebels by himself, basically telling Paulie to make sure that Valerie is dead or they're gonna be fucked. Paulie hangs up the phone in complete horror as he tells Chris that the guy was an interior decorator, prompting one of the most iconic exchanges in television history.
You're not gonna believe this. He killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Guy was an interior decorator.
His house looked like shit.
Hours pass by as Paulie and Chris continue stumbling their way through the woods, paranoid that Valerie is gonna pop up at any moment. And they hear footsteps rustling through the snow and start shooting their guns like crazy. Paulie slips down a hill of snow and falls down like a cartoon character as Chris yells at Paulie that he got him. But it turns out to be one of those good news, bad news situations.
If we were trying, we wouldn't have come close.
Paulie complains that he lost his shoe as a result of the tumble from earlier. And we cut to Jackie flaking out on another night with Meadow, claiming that he needs to fix his mom's car, which makes Meadow upset. She looks at the words Jackie used in their Scrabble game, like poo, ass, and the, which makes Meadow contemplate the fact that she's dating a complete dumbass. It's nighttime, and Paulie and Chris are still lost in the woods. And Paulie complains about his foot going numb as he spots an abandoned truck to stay in. The two guys freeze their balls off as Chris wonders if Valerie is even dead at all, considering that they just learned he's trained for these types of conditions. But Paulie angrily assures him that he is, as Tony eats dinner with the family, purposefully eating less so he can save room for Gloria, figuratively and literally.
South of the border, where the tuna fish play.
Chris and Paulie continue trying to convince themselves that Valerie is totally dead and not out there, and how it's fine if he is out there, as Chris finds a bag on the ground with a bunch of condiment packets, and they start sucking on them like popsicles as their main source of nutrition. Back at the Soprano residence, Carm's parents come over and reveal that Carm's dad has glaucoma, which kills Tony's Gloria boner a bit as a call from Paulie kills it even more, with Paulie telling Tony that they're still trapped in the middle of Pine Barrens while Tony gets progressively angrier. Paulie tries pinning the blame on Chris for the whole situation. And while Tony points out that Paulie said earlier that Valerie sucker punched him, Paulie goes, and then hangs up. Meadow calls Jackie asking where the hell he is and asks a friend in her dorm if she can borrow her car. And Gloria chastises Tony right out of the gate for being late. She says that dinner is now ruined as Tony says he'll try and make it up to her, while Chris tries his damnedest to get a fire started. And he hears rustling in the woods and goes back into the car, where Paulie tries ripping the padding off the car while complaining about how Silvio should have gotten the money instead. The two start arguing with each other over who caused this mess as Paulie wears the carpet like a blanket, with Paulie mentioning that Tony talked to him like a child despite all of his years of earning. Paulie theorizes that this car had to get here somehow and proposes walking around to try and find a road, but Chris says he's not leaving him here, and Paulie decides to piss Tony off a fourth time and call him again. He tells Tony that they're dying out here and gives Tony the directions on where they are, and Tony tells Paulie to put Chris on the phone, where Chris tells Tony about his head injury as Tony realizes that he should probably actually go out there and save them. He tells Gloria that he's got an emergency to cover as Gloria gets extremely pissed off, and decides to put the steak she cooked for them to another use.
I don't got time for this shit.
Oh, now you're gonna leave your low-life piece of shit. You know what? Here, take your fucking dinner.
Tony smiles and leaves as Gloria destroys her entire home. And Meadow waits out in her car by Jackie's place with her friend to see if Jackie is cheating on her. Tony heads to Junior's house as Junior wonders why Tony smells like steak. And Tony grabs a drink as Bobby walks in one of the greatest hunting outfits ever.
Fuck this.
The show cuts back to Meadow, where she realizes that her assumptions were correct as Jackie walks out with Wendy from Breaking Bad. And she yells at Jackie to never call her again, with Jackie getting frustrated as if he didn't already learn his lesson from cheating last episode. Tony drives over to Pine Barrens with Bobby and apologizes for laughing at him, and says that he appreciates him for taking care of his uncle. Bobby mentions that Junior loves Tony very much and says that he wishes Junior was his uncle, as Chris and Paulie continue dying in the car, with Paulie accidentally revealing that he had Tic Tacs on him the whole time and ate them all. Tony and Bobby pull up to the same place Chris and Paulie did, with Chris and Paulie's car suspiciously missing, and Tony tries calling Paulie, but with no luck. Chris starts pissing by Paulie's side as Paulie tells him to stop, but Chris says nuh-uh, and mentions to Paulie that he overheard him earlier trying to pin the entire situation on him, speculating that Paulie's going to try and choke Chris to death so that Tony will only have Paulie's version of events. The two start fighting each other, and it nearly gets bloody before the two stare at each other for a moment and Chris starts laughing like the Joker, and the two promise not to leave each other in the woods. Meadow lies in bed sick as she tells Caitlin that her and Jackie are done, and cries about how great he was and how he was not at all a complete idiot, while Paulie creates a makeshift shoe out of the rug. The morning rolls around as the two walk out of the car, with Chris wearing the carpet around himself while Tony and Bobby keep searching around for Thing 1 and Thing 2.
First place I'm hitting is Denny's.
Oh, really? You want to suffer more? What do you get, off to this shit? Paulie gets his makeshift shoe caught in the snow, and eventually gives up and just shoots it. Paulie's anger actually ends up being their saving grace, and the four guys call out to each other with more gunshots and yelling before they finally find each other. They finally get to Tony's car as Paulie realizes that his car is gone, and they tell them to turn up the heat as Chris dives right into the sandwiches. Bobby says it might have been some kids who stole the cars. Chris realizes that it might have been Valerie, and Tony asks if Paulie's got the money, which Paulie sadly says was in the car. Tony says that was literally all he asked for and tells him to just forget about it. And Tony asks that they should go searching for Valerie, leaving the decision to Paulie as captain. Paulie decides that they should just cut their losses since it was a clean headshot anyway. And Tony drives them home, telling Paulie that if Valerie comes back from the dead, it's his problem, not Tony's, which Paulie agrees to. The car ride home is completely silent as Chris puffs a cigarette while Paulie gets yelled at by Tony for having a spot of mayonnaise on his chin. And Paulie stares out the window as a classical opera song plays in the background. We cut to Tony in therapy ranting about how Gloria is making his life miserable, despite him earlier saying she was beautiful and like an angel and better than therapy. Tony asks why bad things keep happening to him despite the good things he's doing for his family, like cheating on his wife. And Melfi says that they should talk about what attracts Tony to unstable, depressive individuals, reminding him of a certain other woman in his life that was also unstable and depressive, drawing the episode to a close. Yep, Pine Barrens is amazing. I had a pretty similar experience to this episode the way I did with the Fly episode from Breaking Bad, where I initially thought it was good on a first viewing, but nothing more. And then on a second viewing, I appreciated it way more than I originally did. There's a lot of discussion over whether or not The Sopranos is a drama or a comedy, as while the show undoubtedly has dramatic elements, it's also mixed in with a ton of comedic elements as well to balance things out. While I personally believe the show is a lot more complicated than that and doesn't lean one way or the other, one thing that I can positively say is that Pine Barrens is a pure, unfiltered comedy. It has its dramatic moments, of course, like all good comedies should, but looking at the big picture, comedy is the main focus of this episode. It was written to make you laugh, and it worked. I barely even had to write jokes for this segment because the funny moments in this episode did the job for me. There were so many great lines and funny moments throughout its entire duration, as well as served as great character moments for Paulie, Chris, and Tony, but especially Paulie. This is the episode that cemented Paulie as the true comedic relief of the Sopranos crew. Every element of his character, from his pettiness to his wit to his anger and his fears, put on full display for everyone to see. The job he was sent out to do with Chris could have been the easiest thing ever. Valerie wasn't even remotely hesitant on handing over the money. But of course, Paulie has to waltz in and cause the entire issue to snowball. And later tries pinning the blame on everyone but himself, which is equally hilarious. Chris and Paulie's dynamic made for such great entertainment, and watching Paulie and Chris slowly drive themselves mad, as well as Tony getting progressively angrier at Paulie's incompetence, was extremely funny. Speaking of which, this wasn't just a great episode for Chris and Paulie. Tony dealing with Gloria was also really fun to watch too. He learns the hard way that you shouldn't stick your dick in crazy, and all of it culminating with Tony getting bitch slapped by a slab of meat was absolutely glorious. Jackie not learning his lesson after getting the absolute piss beaten out of him last episode by Tony is so mind-boggling that it adds even more to the comedic elements of this episode. And even Bobby gets a little moment to shine with his stupid hunting outfit. Fun fact about this scene, by the way, James Gandolfini's reaction in this scene is completely genuine. The reason he was laughing was because the crew had Steve Sherpa wear dreadlocks and a massive dildo hanging out of his underwear. And they purposefully didn't tell James Gandolfini beforehand so they could capture his genuine reaction, which makes for such a great moment. This is up there with one of my favorite fun facts about The Sopranos, or frankly any TV show ever made. Valerie was also an extremely fun character to watch. The acting and the writing made for a really interesting and creative performance. And one of my favorite parts about this whole episode is that we have no idea what happens to him afterwards. I mean, he got shot in the head in the middle of the woods wearing pajamas in freezing cold temperatures, so that's gonna be pretty fucking hard to survive. But not only do we know for a fact that he's trained to adapt to severe situations like this, but Paulie's car ends up missing by the end of the episode. Personally, I have no idea where he could be during the rest of this show. Considering his blood trail ended really quickly when Paulie and Chris tried finding him, my guess is that he was able to cover up his wound with like a leaf or snow or something, and then made his way back to Paulie's car, used the rug he was covered up with in the back as a bandage, and then drove out of there. And then proceeded to either make his way back to Russia or bleed out in the car. We heard from Slava that he's basically a husk of his former self, so maybe he saw this as the last straw or something. The show purposely leaves a lot of stuff open-ended to keep viewers guessing, and trust me when I say, this is not the last time something like this happens in The Sopranos. What is it with Paulie and Denny's, by the way? Why would he ever want to go to Denny's? What, did he get paid by them or something?
What are you doing? Is that your ultimate breakfast?
Yeah? Is that the Grand Slam?
The what? What? Oh, man.
Denny's new build-your-own Grand Slam, starting at $5.99.
Denny's, real breakfast, 24/7.
Paulie. You swine. Other than that, Pine Barrens is an absolutely terrific episode, the pinnacle of comedy in the Sopranos universe. I would go as far as to call it a timeless episode of television. You can watch this even without the context of the show and still understand why people call it one of the best. I am feeling a very strong double S tier for this episode. Season 3, Episode 12, Amour Fou. At least I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. You know, if you translate Amour Fou from French to English, you actually get the phrase like the video and subscribe to Beat Rice. Isn't that crazy? The same opera song from the end of Pine Barrens opens the episode, where Carm and Meadow walk around a museum as Meadow reveals that her and Jackie's relationship is donezo, which surprises Carm. Before she can ask for more info, however, she stumbles across a painting that touches her heart and causes her to cry, and Meadow looks at her really concerned before Carm says that they should go eat. Gloria finds Tony and tries apologizing for throwing meat at his head, but Tony tells her to go fuck herself. And Gloria says that she's just been having a couple bad weeks as Tony walks to his appointment. He talks to Melfi about their relationship as Melfi describes it as Amour Fou, or crazy love in French.
Amour Fou.
Oh, I got it wrong! And Tony mentions the fact that Gloria is a little bit insane.
She gets freaky.
What? Tony brings up the fact that he enjoys not needing to give her any money, mentioning her independent-mindedness as well as her intellect, and also mentions her deep, dark, black eyes, which Melfi says is a very complicated description, and Tony gets pissed off at this somehow before Melfi redirects the conversation to how he thinks Gloria sees him, and he admits that she might see him as a tough guy, which embarrasses Tony. Melfi describes Gloria and Tony's dynamic like a moth to a flame, with Tony being the flame and vice versa, saying that people don't just throw steak at other people for no reason, and Jackie and Dino start kicking up to Ralphie as a way to make their way into the business. Jackie says fuck Meadow as if he wasn't the one cheating on her, as Ralphie makes fun of him for being a dumbass, and tells Dino and Jackie that they're doing well as he kicks them out to make some calls. Meanwhile, Gloria and Tony talk after a round of Battleship before Gloria jumps over to answer a call, believing it to be her sister, which it isn't. She tells Tony that her sister said she can never see her niece or nephew again, as Tony unsuccessfully tries shifting the conversation to something less sad and depressing. But Gloria continues rambling on about family issues and job issues and then starts dancing. Jackie and Dino notice a couple of Spanish-speaking guys disrespecting the pizza parlor, and Jackie takes it to an 11 and pulls a gun on them so they leave. Chris walks into the store just as the guys are leaving, and Jackie says that they had to straighten them out as the pizza parlor owner criticizes Jackie for breaking glass bottles that he's been collecting for years, which is a great look for Jackie. Chris asks how business is going and pitches a heist for them, but Jackie says that they're with Ralphie now and says that Tony would blow a gasket if he found out, to which Chris basically says, fuck him, money's money. He tells Jackie to call him if he ever decides to jump off the Ralphie ship, as Carm waits around in the Mercedes dealership, and in the case of extremely bad timing, Gloria finds out that Carm is Tony's wife as she's addressed by Mrs. Soprano, and Gloria gets pissed and goes out of her way to take Carm out for a test drive. She talks to Carm about her marriage and asks about her children in this tense scene as Gloria fools around, reaching extremely fast speeds that causes Carm to grasp the door a bit. She notices Carm's beautiful diamond ring and asks Carm about her husband as she nearly crashes the damn car into the garage. And she says it was very nice to meet Carm as she drops her off. Jackie and Dino glaze Chris at dinner as Ralphie says that Chris got made early because he wanted the position, similar to how Tony Soprano and Jackie Sr. got made. He tells Jackie and Dino the story of how he was on a small crew with Tony, Silvio, Jackie Sr. and others when they were young, and how Jackie Sr. and Tony planned to rob a card game from a guy named Ficha Lamana, and ended up walking away with over $20,000 when it was all said and done. Ralphie mentions that he was also supposed to join the robbery, but that he decided to play Battleship with some girl instead. Ralphie expresses his regret for not joining the robbery, as this event ended up with Tony and Jackie Sr. on the fast track to being made while Ralphie was stuck still progressing through the hierarchy. If this event sounds a bit familiar, that's because Richie Aprile mentioned the same event to Tony last season, mentioning that he helped stick up for Tony during the sit-down after the robbery, showing that this event was indeed a major cause for Tony Soprano's eventual uprising in the crew. Ralphie lets the story set in before going, well, anyways, I'm going to bed, see you later. And Jackie thinks about this story as Carm watches TV at home, and she finds herself crying once more at a sad segment on TV before realizing that it's a commercial for dog food. And she asks herself what's wrong with her before the show cuts to Tony and Gloria making out. And she realizes that somebody slashed one of the tires on her car. Gloria notices a look in Tony's eye and starts accusing him of knowing who did this, and Tony says that one of his exes once slashed his tires when they broke up and that the thought dashed through his mind. Gloria deduces that the ex was the who called the boat. And when Tony offers to pay for her tires, Gloria accuses him of having a guilty conscience as Tony accuses her of exaggerating a bunch of her life issues so that she can play the victim. Meanwhile, stupid Jackie takes some very subtle inspiration from Ralphie and says to Dino that they could rob Jean Pontecorvo's card game. And while Dino mentions that Jean is with Ralphie, Jackie still insists that this is a fantastic and wonderful idea that will work. They go back inside and watch that one scene from Basic Instinct where Sharon Stone flashes her meow cat at the camera as we cut to Carm talking with the father of the church, telling him about her meeting with Dr. Krakauer and how right all the things he told her was, and how she suspects that she either has ovarian cancer or potentially another child due to her hormones being all over the place recently. They meet in his office, where Carm mentions that Dr. Krakauer said that she should leave Tony, which the father says is out of the question. She continues expressing her guilt, saying that while she loves Tony, her life is financed by his crimes, and that the thought of potentially bringing another child into this terrifies her, which is interesting considering how gung-ho she was about having another kid last season. That reality check really fucked her up. The father tells Carm that she should start living through the good parts of Tony as she not so subtly hides her ring from view, which Carm says she believes she can do, as the father also tells Carm to go visit a doctor. Carm eats breakfast with Tony and informs him that Jackie and Meadow are no longer a thing, and Gloria calls Carm about a new car that she might want to look at. Carm tells Tony about this wonderful saleswoman working at Globe Motors, mentioning that she gave her a test drive to the house the other day, which pisses Tony off tremendously as he storms over to the dealership. He scolds Gloria for talking to his wife and driving her home, and Gloria says that she did it because she was angry about Irina. She tries defending herself by claiming that it's normal to be interested in your current significant other's previous/current significant others, but Tony tells her that's fucking weird and says that their relationship is over. Carm gets her ovaries checked as Jackie gets tired of watching TV and says that they should get to robbing ASAP, telling Dino to call Carlo to bring his stuff. As Carm eats dinner with other fellow mob wives, saying that her appointment went well, with the doctor telling her that she's never been better. Tony talks with his lawyer at the Bing as Gloria calls Tony crying and stammering like crazy, and he begrudgingly heads over to her house as Gloria begs Tony for him to come back with her, which Tony bluntly refuses. He says that, while Gloria is very talented, she's also slightly crazy, mentioning the tire incident and how she acted like he's never had an ex in the past before, and Gloria sarcastically says that she'll act like a mute and let Tony bang other women out there. Tony criticizes Gloria's tone, but calmly tells her that their relationship is over, and Gloria strikes back by switching on crazy mode and yelling at Tony, and Tony responds by slapping her across the face.
Where the fuck do you get off, huh?
You don't care.
What do you think, you're the only one with problems? You think my life's a fucking picnic?
Oh, poor you.
Tony suddenly realizes that Gloria is awfully similar to another woman in his life who would also tell Tony, poor you. Livia. The similarities between the two, from their psychotic, manipulative behavior, to their frequent mood shifts, to their constant exaggerated family drama, to them consistently playing the victim, even down to them sharing similar phrases like saying they'll act like a mute, become clear in Tony's head as he stumbles back, talking about how his mother was a bottomless black hole, just like Gloria. Tony tells Gloria that she's dangerous and that he doesn't want her in his life. And Gloria pushes the situation one step further and threatens to tell Carmelo about their affair if Tony walks out the door. A sentence that absolutely enrages Tony as he chases Gloria into her kitchen and fucking chokeslams her onto the ground, threatening to kill her if she tells anybody in his family about their affair. Similar to Livia, Gloria tells Tony to kill her as he chokes her. And just like with Livia, Tony refuses to do so and instead gets up and walks out of the house, leaving Gloria to lie on the ground. Gloria is easily one of the most memorable of Tony's affairs throughout the show, not only due to the similarities between her and Livia, but also simply because of how batshit insane she is. Like in this scene alone, in the course of 5 minutes, she goes from crying hysterically to acting calm to screaming at Tony, all to manipulate him and to wear him down emotionally. She's also a massive hypocrite for getting pissed at Tony for having exes, considering the fact that she admitted to murdering 7 relationships in the first 2 minutes of her introduction. And you know for a fact that she would have acted like it was no big deal if Tony was pissed at her for this. She also knew that Tony was affiliated with the mob and had absolutely no concerns about the horrible things that he does, and was somehow surprised that he had a wife that he was cheating on. Not trying to justify it or anything, but like, you mess with a boy, you get the horns. Also, we never actually find out whether or not her tires were actually slashed by Irina or some kids in the neighborhood or whatever. So it's entirely possible that Gloria was the one who slashed them herself. It makes sense. She did just find out about Carmelo the scene before, so it's possible that she was trying to start some shit with Tony. Annabella Shora did such a fantastic job portraying this basket case. She ended up getting an Emmy nomination for it, which I believe is totally deserved. Portraying this vast array of emotions from one scene to the next could not have been an easy task. And there's always this strong sense of tension whenever she's on screen, especially with the scene when she was driving Carmela. She never seemed angry on the outside for a second, but you just knew how absolutely furious she was on the inside as she was driving. And she's somehow surprised that Tony was angry about this. I've said it once and I will say it again. Never stick your dick in crazy. This absolutely amazing scene is followed up by another equally amazing scene, where Jackie Jr. and his band of misfits attempt to rob Gene's card game. Jackie almost backs out at the last second until he gets a fantastic little bit of motivation.
Let's do it before the crank wears off.
They break into the game, and Chris and the guys have basically zero reaction, causing Jackie to hilariously say shit under his breath. And they start collecting the money as the guys tell them that this was a very poor decision since it's a low-level game, while Sunshine keeps quoting proverbs. Jackie tells him to shut up as Chris looks at Jackie suspiciously, and...
If you can keep your head while those around you can't, then you're...
A huge fight breaks out, resulting in the death of Sunshine and Carlo, as well as a thigh injury for Furio. And Jackie and Dino run out into the street and realize that their getaway van drove off. And Jackie steals this lady's car and leaves Dino in the dust.
Fuck! Hey, cocksucker.
Chris, please. We didn't know you were in there. We're with Ralphie. Please?
Saying we're with Ralphie is probably the worst possible thing he could have said here. The guys drive Furio to the hospital as Dr. Freed, the penis doctor, gets a call from Tony, who tells him to come remove the bullet from Furio since the hospital wouldn't let them in. And he arrives to remove the bullet as Furio screams in Italian-ridden pain. Chris tells Tony that he knows for sure that Jackie Jr. was behind this and says he wants him killed by tonight. But Tony tells him not to, and Chris deduces that this is only because he's Jackie Sr.'s kid and calls Tony a hypocrite, saying that everyone else has got to play by the rules but Tony. And Tony tells him to fuck off and that Chris is gonna respect him either way. The next day, Tony talks to Ralphie about the incident, with Tony giving his condolences considering the fact that he and Jackie have been living under the same roof. Ralphie says that, despite all of this, he wants to give Jackie Jr. a pass, with Tony saying that it's ultimately Ralphie's choice and subtly criticizing him.
The one thing you cannot do, Ralph, is blame yourself. You took this kid under your wing. You schooled him as best you could. Didn't you?
Ralphie claims that Jackie Sr. spoiled Jackie Jr. as Tony hands him the piece that Ralphie gave to Jackie Jr. And Ralphie walks out of the pork store in disbelief before walking away. In therapy, Tony realizes that Gloria wanted to be killed by Tony, with Melfi noting that she loved Tony and rhetorically asking why he would subject himself to someone just like Livia all over again. While Tony says that he doesn't want to fuck his mom, Melfi says that it's not that he wants to do that, but rather that he wants to please her and win her affection. She says that Tony's need to please his mother is similar to Gloria's need for drama, and how that behavior once passed for love for Tony. Tony tries asking if he should be concerned about Gloria blabbing, but Melfi says she doesn't know and asks Tony why he keeps putting himself through dangerous relationships, with Tony saying that he might be looking for a way out of his current marriage. But Melfi says that he knows that he'll never leave Carm, saying that he knows that he's made one good decision in life regarding women and that his own selfishness won't let him let go of that. Meanwhile, Gloria goes on another test drive with who else but Patsy Parisi, and while she thinks that she's about to get robbed or kidnapped or whatever, Patsy scares the living daylights out of her and threatens her not to go near Tony or his family and that their relationship is over. He also mentions that the last face she'll see is his, not Tony's.
We understand each other? It won't be cinematic.
Poor Rosalie finds out that Jackie Jr. is still missing as Ralphie attempts to calm her down, lying to Rosalie by saying that this all stemmed from Jackie Jr. having a cocaine addiction and saying they'll try and find him as Rosalie cries in his arms. This could be true considering Jackie Jr. made cash dealing drugs, but I personally believe that Ralphie is just projecting his own problems with drugs onto Jackie Jr. as a way to avoid responsibility for the mistakes he made raising Jackie. Meanwhile, Carm meets with Tony again, and he asks Carm why she doesn't have her big ring on, and Carm lies by saying that she's getting it resized and not because she feels horribly guilty about this lifestyle. They get dinner ready as Patsy puts groceries in his car, and he drives off as the show fades to black, ending the episode. This was a very good episode. This might be a hot take, but I honestly didn't think it was as good as the first time I watched it. While there were some undeniably fantastic scenes like Jackie Jr.'s pathetic attempt at a robbery, Ralphie telling Jackie and Dino about Feech's card game, Gloria and Tony fighting, Gloria nearly killing Carm. Actually, most scenes involving Gloria in this episode were solid. Despite a handful of great scenes though, I wouldn't personally call the rest of the episode some of the best material the show has to offer. It's still a good episode though, don't get me wrong. It's really good actually. Whenever I watch the scene with Ralphie telling Jackie and Dino about the card game, one of the main thoughts that goes through my head is if Ralphie intentionally set Jackie up, knowing that he'd try to do something similar to what Tony and his father did all those years ago. But after thinking about it, I can't really think of a reason why he would want to do that. Like, yeah, Ralphie is an obviously malicious guy, but it's clear that he wanted Jackie to succeed and cares about him a lot, evidenced by the fact that he gave him a 38 a few episodes ago. But his attempts at encouraging Jackie ended up hurting him more than they did needed help. Like, for example, Ralphie's story. I think it's clear that Ralphie was only telling this story to encourage Jackie and Dino to figure out ways to make their way up the hierarchy and prove their worth and to not pass up any opportunities that come their way. But Jackie took this as Ralphie literally saying, hey, go rob a card game, that'll make people think you're cool. Which, hey, I gotta say, it worked. Ralphie should have realized how stupid Jackie is, but he unfortunately wasn't able to be as close with him as he wanted, leading to a strong disconnect in their relationship despite his attempts to get closer with him. First family, then get them prepared to enter the Mafia, not the other way around. Once again, Gloria was a fantastic character to watch and was incredibly well written and acted. And I think it was really interesting how Patsy specifically said that her murder wouldn't be cinematic. That was absolutely a line that Tony told Patsy to tell her, considering the fact that Melfi mentioned to Tony how Gloria had a need for drama in her life, along with the fact that Gloria wanted to be murdered by Tony. Arguably one of Patsy's greatest moments, besides trespassing onto Tony's property and pissing into his pool. I'm feeling a low S tier for this one. I was wrong earlier, by the way. It didn't mean like and subscribe. It actually means like and subscribe with notifications on. Just wanted to prevent any misinformation. Season 3, Episode 13. The Army of One. Hey, it rhymes! The episode begins like all good episodes do, with AJ and his friend going pee-pee in the school storage space, and they break into their geometry class to steal answers for their next test. Jackie Jr. goes into hiding in a Booton housing project, going under the pseudonym Mr. X, as Paulie moves his mother into Green Grove, where she gets emotional about how nice Paulie is to her. Carm talks to Tony about how sad Rosalie is about Jackie being a drug dealer, as Paulie demands Ralphie to kick his dues up to him, and makes fun of him for Jackie being a dumbass, who Ralphie says he'll punish as soon as he's located, as Silvio immediately pinpoints his location as a housing project in Booton, which is hilarious considering this line.
You'll be safe here, bro. Your Guido friends would never think to look for you here.
Vito calls Ralphie pretending to be Tony while Ralphie plays along, as Ralphie asked Vito to call in 5 minutes, and Vito says a bunch of bullshit as Ralphie hangs up the call and says Tony needs him and goes, well, we'll talk later, bye, pissing Paulie off considerably. Tony gets a call in bed from who else but Jackie Jr., who goes, you gotta help me. But Tony tells him to eat a dick. And while Jackie says that Tony and Jackie Sr. were granted forgiveness, Tony tells Jackie to figure out the difference and hangs up. To my knowledge, nobody was fucking murdered as a result of Tony and Jackie Sr.'s robbery, so that might have to do with that. Jackie goes boo-hoo-hoo while sweating profusely as this little girl named Lena offers to play chess. And Furio walks around like Dr. House while Ralphie meets with Tony in the car, where Tony mentions that Jackie Jr. called him and sarcastically talks to Ralphie like he's got everything under control as Ralphie struggles to figure out what to do with Jackie. Principal Buster brings down AJ and his friend to congratulate them on their seemingly great test scores. And while AJ and his friend look at each other and credit their success to their hard work studying, the principal confronts them about the pee-pee stains that they found in the storage space, claiming that the DNA samples were an exact match as AJ's friend folds under zero pressure. And AJ says that he didn't have to pee until his friend started peeing. Once again, a brilliant defense by AJ. The FBI guys talk about how Junior beat cancer, as well as figuring out a way to target Chris through Adriana. And Chief Frank asked this FBI gal named Deborah if she'd like a new best friend for the next few months. Meanwhile, Lena kicks Jackie's ass at chess as her dad says that Jackie's done for, saying that Lena's developing her knights really well. And Jackie rage quits the game as Lena's dad tells Jackie that the only way he's gonna learn is by letting the situation play out. And Jackie has a sweet moment with Lena before leaving the place. He walks down the street as Vito pops up and blasts Jackie from behind with what looks like a water pistol, and takes his ever-loving sweet time getting into the getaway car as if he didn't just kill someone in front of like 5 people. Turns out Ralphie decided not to give the kid a pass after all as he calls Rosalie while Vito comes back from the hit. And Ralphie casually goes over to brush his teeth while Chris and Paulie plan the operation for the next Super Bowl. And Chris leaves while Tony loses his shit over food in this really funny moment.
I've been dreaming of that fucking lo mein all the way to fuck over here. Now who came in here and ate my shit?
Tony talks about how angry he is over Ralphie, likely due to the fact that he played a role in causing the downfall of Jackie Jr., as Paulie complains about Ralphie owing him money while the phone starts ringing. Paulie answers the phone and says it's Carmela, who says that she sounds like she's crying, and Tony finds out that AJ got expelled from high school, which pisses off Tony tremendously as he rants to Carmen and AJ in the house about how he works hard to give AJ the luxuries of his everyday life.
I work hard all day to pay for this 6,000 square foot house, big screen TVs, food on the table, video games, all kinds of scooters and bicycles, Columbia University, and for what? To come home to this?
Sucks to be you.
AJ storms upstairs as Tony tells Carm that they're going full throttle on AJ and sending him to military school. An idea that Carm does not like at all, as Tony looks at a bunch of brochures at dinner later that night. Carm gets a call and finds out from Rosalie's sister Marie that Jackie Jr. was shot to death. And she rushes over to Rosalie's as Tony realizes what Ralphie has done, while also telling AJ that this is what'll happen to him if he doesn't shape up. AJ later calls Meadow, who makes fun of AJ for copying everything, and that DNA test takes 6 weeks to process. And AJ decides that he's the perfect person to break the news that Jackie was murdered, which causes Meadow to break down in tears. Tony talks to Melfi in therapy about the whole ordeal with Jackie, saying that he failed him and that he won't make the same mistake with AJ. Melfi asks Tony what he wants from his children, and Tony says that he wants to give them every opportunity in life so that they can go in their own direction. He also mentions how AJ would never be able to make it in the Mafia as Meadow lies around in bed at home sad over Jackie's death. Carm sits down with Meadow and tells her that they've planned Jackie's funeral arrangements, as Meadow says that Jackie is the first person her age that she knew personally who's died, and says that she believes that there's more to the story than Jackie getting killed over dealing ecstasy, saying that half the people she knows takes it and that Jackie grew up around Mafia people. And Carm gets defensive and starts saying that Meadow is actively trying to find boogeymen to blame before leaving to a military school visit.
Stealing an exam, that's quite a personal defeat, isn't it?
Holy shit, Tobin Bell? Like Jigsaw Tobin Bell? This is the best episode of the show! General Jigsaw talks to AJ about the differences between AJ's school and theirs, saying that the focus is put less on the students themselves and more on the core, detailing the strict daily regime that all students must follow. Like classes from 0800 to 1440 and kidnapping Dr. Gordon while wearing a pig mask at 1441. General Jigsaw sends AJ out to talk with another captain as he talks with Carm and Tony about the program, with Carm worrying about AJ being harshly disciplined and not being able to think creatively or independently. Tony is totally on board for this, however, as the general tells him the army's motto of today, which is, if somebody does something mildly bad, you should put them on a torture device and potentially maim them, but don't kill them because killing is distasteful! Not really. The real motto is, be an army of one. And while Tony tries to calm Carm down and say they're just gonna march a bit, General Jigsaw tells the two that military school will come with plenty of mentoring from faculty involvement. Suddenly, the general goes haha just kidding and places Tony and Carm on the shotgun carousel and forces AJ to pick a parent to live. And when AJ's like, no, I don't want to do this, Jigsaw goes,
sucks to be you. Make your choice.
Back in the actual Sopranos universe, Carm argues with Tony and says she doesn't want her son to become a professional killer as if her husband doesn't kill people for money. And Tony proclaims that the US doesn't even go to war anymore, which, considering that this aired in 2001, is really bad timing.
They were marching with rifles, Tony!
They're symbolic. The barrels are plugged.
Symbolic of what?
Respect!
Respect! Carm intensely yells at Tony that she's not going to allow AJ to be sent to that school. And while Tony yells about how AJ thinks the world owes him a living, Carm asks who could have given him that idea. A comeback that pisses off Tony as he starts angrily slamming the door. Tony and the family later go to Jackie's funeral as Paulie immediately starts talking with Tony about a sit-down with Ralphie. And Tony tells him to shut the fuck up before he and Carm give their condolences to Rosalie. Meadow breaks down in tears again upon witnessing Jackie's body as Rosalie notes the significant lack of people attending the funeral, with some people taking business calls in the back. And Chris apologizes to Tony about his behavior last episode, saying that he understands Tony's relationship with Jackie as Tony tells him that he doesn't know and walks out. After the funeral, Carm tells Tony that they should try it his way as Paulie arrives at the sit-down with Ralphie. As Paulie talks about the Green Grove nursing home.
Retirement community,
while Ralphie finally arrives and spits out this wonderful one-liner.
You're late.
Well, tomorrow I can be on time, but you'll be stupid forever.
Hey, sit down.
Ralphie complains about Rosalie crying all night and how he slept at his Gumar's place so he didn't have to listen to it. And the sit-down results in Tony demanding Ralphie to give Paulie $12K, a large downgrade from the $50K Paulie was owed. And Paulie complains about it before the crew gets distracted by Porfirio falling over in a bunch of ice. Adriana looks for clothes at the store as FBI gal Deborah, going under the pseudonym Danielle, walks up to Adriana and starts making small talk, and the two go to Starbucks together as Tony watches Dr. Freed's penis commercial. AJ walks down the stairs in his military outfit as Carm and Tony pretend like he looks great, and AJ complains that he looks like a jerk-off and begins crying at the prospect of attending military school. As Tony yells at him that he's going to be attending there, however, AJ begins hyperventilating and passes out onto the floor as Carm and Tony try to help him. Tony tells Melfi about how AJ is the same stupid rotten soprano gene as himself, saying that AJ can no longer attend military school because of this. And Melfi says that this doesn't brand AJ as anything and that Tony blaming his genes really equates to Tony blaming himself. Tony mentions that this has already happened before and that the school didn't tell Carm and Tony because the nurse presumed it was dehydration, and proclaims that he's gonna sue over this before calming down and asking how he's going to save AJ. Paulie, Silvio, and Chris get jumped by the cops at Jackie's funeral, and Junior hilariously runs away from the funeral after noticing the police as Rosalie and Meadow fall into crying fits. They go back to Rosalie's house as Ralphie casually sits down to watch TV like nothing happened, and Kelly and Meadow get into an argument over the cause of Jackie's death, with Meadow surprisingly repeating what Carmela told her earlier about Jackie getting caught up in the drug world, while Kelly says it was some fat guy who was working with a crew. Later, everyone heads over to Artie's restaurant as Junior notes the really shitty turnout as well as how stupid Jackie Jr. was when he was alive, saying that the turnout would have been much larger had Jackie Sr. still been alive. Junior says that he's off of house arrest and has been deemed physically fit to stand his RICO trial, and Paulie talks with Johnny Sack about the Esplanade situation, saying that Tony's ruling against him despite knowing that his mother is ill, and Johnny Sack says that he doesn't stick his beak in as he starts sticking his beak in, agreeing with Paulie that Tony doesn't respect his elders. Meadow talks to Carm a wee bit drunk about how Jackie Jr.'s family never took care of him right and just let him do whatever he wanted, and Carm says that she's glad she sees, which pisses off Meadow. Ralphie makes jokes at Artie's place as Janice starts getting suspiciously flirty with him, with Junior singing in Italian with a guy playing guitar. Everyone in the place encourages Junior to sing a song for them, and Junior says what the hell and begins singing to celebrate beating cancer. He starts singing an unironically very beautiful song as Meadow, drunk as a skunk, starts throwing bread rolls while laughing with Kelly, and Tony chases her out of the restaurant. He angrily asks Meadow where she's going as she yells at Tony that all of this is complete bullshit, and she drunkenly runs in the middle of the street and nearly gets hit by a car. Tony goes fuck it, and heads back inside, where Junior continues singing an Italian song called Cor Ingrata, which means ungrateful heart, and drives many people to tears. The show plays several songs in different languages over Junior's singing as we see a shot of everyone getting emotional, and the show fades to black, ending the season. I gotta say, despite how unironically very beautiful Junior's singing is, Meadow is kinda right about how bullshit the whole thing is. Like, Jackie Jr. was an idiot, don't get me wrong, and I can understand why not many people will want to show up to his funeral, but the fact that the same people who planned and completed the hit on the victim are also using his funeral procession not to celebrate his life, but rather to selfishly bask in the nostalgia of their own culture is kind of fucked up. Hey, Junior's singing was good, so I guess I shouldn't complain too much, and you know what else was good? This episode! Tobin Bell's appearance is a very obvious highlight, for me anyways. And what's really surprising is that the first Saw movie actually didn't come out until 3 years after the episode aired. They just happened to hire a horror icon before he actually became a horror icon. Unfortunately, this episode suffers the same problem that Amour Fou suffered, and that's the fact that I didn't enjoy it as much on rewatch like I did the first time I watched it. It doesn't have nearly as many fantastic and memorable scenes as Amour Fou, but nevertheless it was still a solid episode. I enjoyed the ending scene with Junior singing at Vesuvio, and Vito shooting Jackie Jr. and taking 20 years to get into the getaway car was hilarious. Also, AJ getting slapped by Tony was so fucking peak. While the episode is slightly disappointing as a finale, considering the insane finales from Season 1 and Season 2 that we've seen, there's a certain finale coming up in the next video that I am very certain will be making up for that. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves though, we still got this episode to rank. For the final episode of Season 3, I am feeling an A tier. A solid end to an incredible season. I told you it was gonna get better. Season 3 of The Sopranos is really when the show started figuring out the story it wants to tell, along with its own identity. There were a ton of amazing episodes to sift through this time around, a lot of which I was not at all expecting to rate so highly. Another Toothpick wasn't even on my mind when diving into this season, and yet it somehow made its way near the top of the list. Season 3 has got to be one of the most consistently great seasons from the show thus far, with the lowest ranking being in the middle of B tier compared to Season 2's C and Season 1's D. The plotlines this season were really entertaining to follow and developed old and new characters alike exceptionally. Speaking of new characters, Season 3 adds even more new faces to the already vast cavalcade of characters, and gives each one of them time to breathe and grow, turning a certain few of them into some of the show's most iconic, and in certain other cases, most despicable. The Sopranos continues with its hefty ambition and presents us with some of the show's darkest, most action-packed, and in one certain instance that rhymes with fine errands, funniest episodes and moments. Will the show continue this momentum going into Season 4? There's only one way to find out. If you haven't watched the show already, by the way, go watch it! You'll have plenty of time to watch it while I work on these. It's incredible. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all in Season 4. Take care.